everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show, the show where you can call in and you can talk about trans rights, or you can talk about trans people, and you can say almost anything within the YouTube terms and conditions. Call in and try and explain to us why trans people don't deserve rights, and we will politely explain why you are a dickhead. It will be a good time. This is the time to say anything you've ever wanted. So please do call in. You can call in for free by clicking on the link in the description or by typing in the number just below this chat, which I can't see right now and I'm too lazy to scroll to see. It's very easy to find. This week, you could talk to Katy Montgomerie, that is me, the resident British, or the resident Yank. Arden, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I muted again. God damn it. I said I'm Arden Hart, and I just want to clarify that I make no promise that I will be polite. But, you know, as long as you're answering questions honestly, I will absolutely do my best to respect and kind. But
exactly. But yeah, this is the first time we've done the show together in nearly 2 weeks. Very exciting.
It's the closest together I think we've done a show in a long time, and we're set to be together again next week, which is like crazy. This audience is getting spoiled.
But what have you done in the last 2 weeks? Any exciting stuff?
Well, we went to a reptile expo this past weekend, which was our first like really successful one, and we got to, you know, get a couple of kids paired with their first pet snake anyway, and that was really fun. And I've got some cool merch design stuff coming for next month where we're doing a little bit of a special event. So that's coming up. Also, I wanted to point out we have no calls currently. Our lines are open. So if you want to call in, please do. Again, that number is 720-619-2288. And there's also a web link in the description. Please call us. But how about you? What's been going on in the last couple weeks?
I mean, mainly just playing Pokemon cards, to be honest. I did my first ever Twitch stream Pokemon cards thing, where I battled another Twitch streamer in a best of 9 challenge, and I won.
Nice. That's so
Which
fun.
is really good. Best of 9, I won 5-4. It was really fun, really close. The person I played against was really nice. So, yeah, it was a good time. And my other exciting news is also, I guess, Pokemon related. I just bought, for the first time ever, a Nintendo 3DS.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty cool. And I've already stuck some Pokemon stickers on it because I'm a loser. But I don't have any games for it yet, but I decided I should play the Pokemon games that I've never played before because I don't know any of the Pokemon from those games. So basically my entire life revolves around Pokemon now. So
the 3DS was like the best system for Pokemon. I loved
it's really
the 3DS.
Good.
Yeah, they also had the virtual console for a while. I don't know if it's still going where you could get
I just looked.
Oh man, I played so much of like Pokemon Crystal and Silver and stuff like that on the virtual console, but it's really sad that they removed that. I get why. It's an old system. They don't want to keep up the maintenance, but it makes my heart hurt, okay?
I know. It is pretty sad. But yeah, let's try and drum up some interest for some more callers. Let's try and get some spicy callers by discussing the 2 polls. So we have one poll which is quite serious, which was last week's, and one that's going to be much more lighthearted, but both of them are going to be infuriating for gender critical people. So I think this should be good. So trans people, hang in there. The first one's going to be bleak, but we're going to get to the good one next. You might know what's coming. But we're going to talk about this one first. So last week's poll, I wasn't here for, was: do you think Superintendent of Public Schools Ryan Walters is in part responsible for the murder of Nex Benedict following his enforcement of Oklahoma's anti-trans public school policies? And we had 9 out of 10 people saying yes, he is at least in part responsible for the murder of Nex. So Arden, you know more about what's going on here. What happened and what's the latest?
Yeah, so when we did this poll, we were limited in information, and I saw a lot of the comments who were saying no were talking about the fact that at the time, the Owasso police had made a statement that the medical examiner found that the trauma in the incident was not related to Nex Benedict's death. And we have some updates on that, folks, and it is not looking good. Now, I want to couch all of this in that a significant piece of this information comes from an independent journalist called Popular Information, who is very popular on Substack, but I've never heard of them. And so I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that this is not like a national news source, but although they may be trustworthy, I'm just saying that they don't have like national level recognition. Also, police body cam footage interviewing Nex right after the incident when their grandmother came and picked them up and drove them to the emergency room was also released. So in the police cam body footage, that's where we're going to start, the officer walked in and asked Nex what happened. And Nex explained that, also, we found out that I think Nex uses he, they pronouns. We were hearing they, them, and their grandmother was using she, her, but it seemed like he might be more prominent amongst their friends. He seemed to express that a group of girls was loudly talking about them in front of them. And there was some sentiment expressed from other people who were in the school district that slurs were not uncommon in the environment and nothing was ever really done about it. And so Nex decided to throw a water bottle, not the bottle, but the bottle of the water in the bottle on one of these girls. As a result, they jumped him, and there was some fight back from Nex. He said he pushed one of them into a paper towel dispenser. And then they knocked him on the ground and started beating the shit out of him, was his language. And that was pretty much all we got from that interview. The officer left, and Nex seemed, he was on the hospital, like gurney or whatever, but he seemed like relatively okay. Then, as we know, the next morning, when Nex woke up, his grandmother said that his eyes were rolling behind his head. She called the ambulance, and by the time that they arrived, Nex had already stopped breathing and was dead. Now, the police officer who made the announcement that it had nothing to do with the trauma was interviewed by Popular Information. This is the independent journalist that I mentioned at the beginning. Typically, the protocol for these medical examiners is to wait until they have a full report, including a toxicology report, which takes a little bit more time. But the officer in this interview with Popular Information told them that he, in advance of the full report, went to the medical examiner to, quote, get ahead of national scrutiny. Now, if you ask me, that sounds like intentionally obfuscating the facts.
Covering up, yeah.
Yeah. Now, granted, we still don't have all the information, so I really want you guys to take this in kind with all the details and not jump to conclusions that are unwarranted, but I think these are important facts to talk about that could lead to, a bigger degree of change. I think we can't get Nex back, but what we can do is use this momentum that seems to be like nationally happening right now to push for change. And so I think it's really important that we kind of hold on to these details and push for more information. Also, he goes on to explain that the medical examiner did not explicitly tell him that Nex did not die from a result of the fight. Rather, the examiner emphasized waiting for the full toxicology report, which he took to mean that, this is not the trauma of the physical altercation, but rather something in the toxicology report that might be indicative of Nex's death. That's not what the medical examiner was saying. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that following these events, it's Senator Tom Woods, I believe, and Ryan Walters have both made several appalling statements to the news media about their reaction to this event. Ryan Walters told CBS News, "I'm going to completely reject the notion that common sense policies, that there's two genders, and that there shouldn't be gender ideology published in schools has any connection whatsoever to students feeling safe. Except we have explicit say-so from multiple students at the Owasso schools saying that that's exactly how they feel as a result of these policies. We already know that schools and districts who limit access to bathroom use have an increased risk of sexual assault and assault generally on trans people. Also, Tom Woods said on, I forget what the interview was, what the situation was, but was saying that while this is a tragedy and Nex was clearly bullied, that Oklahoma has a supermajority Republican voters constituency, and that Oklahomans don't want that filth in their state. Now, you can say that he was trying to say, we don't want gender ideology, which is harmful in our state, but we want the people. But it's pretty clear what the implications of those words are, and it's pretty clear that that kind of mindset is what creates the sentiment that those girls had, where they thought they could talk cruelly about Nex in front of him, where they could beat the living shit out of him and not face consequences thus far. But luckily, Nex's family is not letting this go yet. They are going to continue doing some sort of independent investigation, and hopefully as more things are uncovered, we will hopefully get to see some justice for Nex. This is a really sad situation, and it's been kind of, difficult, I think, on a lot of trans people to see. But yeah, we really need to not lose momentum on this, I think. I think just the national force that this story has could really drive some positive change, and I don't want to lose that because, there's another bad thing that happens, as is always the case in modern day. But that is the end of my updates and rants.
To cis people who maybe haven't experienced this before, and who are like, wondering what Arden's saying about the momentum and stuff, but also wondering all this stuff about, we haven't got the toxicology report, or maybe Nex did start it, or all this kind of stuff. I just want to point out that every single 100% of trans people who are attacked or murdered or beaten up or anything like that, 100% of them, the transphobes will be saying they started it, this is their fault, no one even attacked them, they actually enjoyed it, they didn't get hurt, they died because they committed suicide, which, because they're unstable, they say all of these things every single time. We saw the same thing here in the UK when Brianna J was murdered. They were saying it was nothing to do with transphobia, even though the killers were both saying a load of transphobic slurs. They were saying, that it was just totally random, and I even see several of them saying that she started it and that she deserved it and stuff. So they just say that all the time. And when this thing with the water came out, I saw I logged onto Twitter in the morning. First tweet I saw was some conservative 100,000 likes or whatever, being like, this interview proves that Nex was the real bully and started it by throwing water on them. And instantly, if you've ever been bullied or seen someone bullied or something, you must know this is what they do. They say things and harass you every single day of your life, and then the one day you snap, that's where they pretend that it started, and they're like, oh, you hit me for no reason, oh, miss, send them to jail. And it's just classic cry bully. Why would one random trans kid pour water over a group of girls for no reason? Especially and you think that's a more reasonable explanation than a group of transphobes in an incredibly transphobic state had been harassing a trans person for ages, and they finally flipped. Just stop being an idiot. It's just so common that this, and there may be a time when a trans person does start something, and of course all the transphobes will be like, they started it, and it will be the one time when they did, and then they'll use that as evidence for every other single one. But I don't see any reason why that's the case this time. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it certainly wasn't the case last time, or the time before, or the time before, or the time before. But yeah, I really think it is it's important for trans rights in general to keep momentum on things like this. But in a way, that's kind of a selfish way of looking at it. It's also important to keep momentum for Nex, because they absolutely will not see any justice at all unless there is some kind of at least statewide momentum. Because all the people in power want to sweep this under the rug. They don't care if a trans person dies. That's good for some of them. Some of them probably were good, there's one less of them in the world. Honestly, that is how, even if they go, oh, it's a tragedy for all the parents involved, on the cameras, lots of them don't give a fuck at all. And yeah, it's just going to disappear. Nothing will happen. Even if the parents push for it, nothing will happen. And that's where you need this international or national pressure from the media, asking the questions, so that these people, the superintendent and the senator or whatever, can't go about their jobs without doing something about this. So demand an inquiry and stuff. And also, it's important to highlight to the world, because there are going to be people, this is the first time they've actually seen one of these transphobic cases made into the media, and they'll see things like, oh, well, it says here in this statistic, 2/3 of trans people have experienced transphobic bullying like this. Oh, it says here that, blah, 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 and they come up with all the statistics, and they'll also be like, hang on, why are all these people who are saying they just had concerns about women's rights suddenly, like, gloating over the death of this child, or saying that they started it or they deserved it or that it didn't even happen? And they'll realize that this is a thing that happens, and so in that way it can make other change too. Yeah, it's important stuff.
Yeah, so everyone take a good deep breath, because we're gonna hopefully put this aside. I mean, obviously somebody's welcome to call in if you have other information that we don't have. But we're going to move on to the next poll, which is a little bit more lighthearted, and try to, as we often say, you're allowed to put the news down and move on from it. This one is
from... You can read this one.
Sure. So this one is from something I've only went on Twitter like twice this week, and for the 2 seconds I was there, I saw about this. Is it okay to read Harry Potter erotica in public? Yes or no? So, Katie, do you want to detail the story?
So obviously, I really love Harry Potter erotica. That's what this is about. So I just want to know if it's
confirmed.
Legit. As we all know, because this might be relevant as I get further on the story, trans people love Harry Potter, and particularly Harry Potter erotica. That is what we are known for. No, but what this is actually about is Helen Joyce, who you might know the name of for two main things. Was caught by someone who recognized her reading Harry Potter erotica on a train on her phone. Obviously, I guess she's a bit older, so with really big font so that they could take a photo from like 2 seats across and see, and you could see this line that was like, Harry was, it's like the line was like, but he just kept pumping.
Oh, God.
So the reason why the thing is, like, straight up, if you just like someone was reading a saucy book on the train, not really a problem. If they were maybe like watching a porn video, especially if it had sound, or if it's like really big writing that maybe a child could see it, or they're like on the train and the same time a school party was on there or something, then it could be on its own just a problem. But the thing is, this is Harry Potter porn, so it's about children. So then it's suddenly a bit more grim, like that an adult's reading it. Also, so Helen Joyce, as I mentioned, you might know for two reasons. One is she's one of the most prominent gender critical people in the UK. I have to be very careful how I talk about her, because she has threatened to sue basically everyone. She does not like criticism at all. She is most well known for being the person who said that we, as in the gender criticals, need to reduce the number of trans people to keep our number down, because we are a huge problem to a sane world. And she was talking about how they're not going to win over the hearts and minds of most of the British public. They need to get through to the decision makers. And so she's part of Sex Matters, which is one of the biggest gender critical groups. And they're signatories of the WDI declaration. So they're calling for like banning trans healthcare for under 18s, banning trans people from public spaces, etc., etc. She also wrote a book called Trans, because, they're just so... Gender criticals are so arrogant that they'll just write a book about some, like, never even talk to a trans person. And she interviewed notorious American anti-Semite Jennifer Bilek for her book. And me and Krista Peterson covered that on one of my YouTube shows, which you should all go and check out. And Jennifer Bilek's theories suppose that there's this collection of Jewish billionaires who have, like, funded transgenderism in order to sell transhumanism to the public. It's a real wacky, like, proper crazy conspiracy theory. After Helen Joyce published her book, Jennifer Bilek accused her of plagiarism and was like, why didn't you cite me when you interviewed me, like, just before you finished writing this book? And, like, the theories are pretty much there. She mentions all the same people, at least, but doesn't, unlike Jennifer Bilek, doesn't highlight the fact that most or all of them are Jewish. So, but you do have to be careful what exactly you say, because in the UK we don't have freedom of speech. So I'm not going to give my opinion on any of that. And I guess they are, to my knowledge, the best way to report the facts of what happened. But if I am wrong, then of course I will take corrections. Anyway, the reason this is kind of funny is because she then had to respond, because everyone, like, she was trending on Twitter and like everyone was rinsing her, because it's kind of cringe seeing as J.K. Rowling's like the cult leader of gender critical, and Helen Joyce is like an S rank gender critical, so she's like the next rung down. It's like J.K. Rowling is the queen, and then like the I don't know what's the next one down from a queen, a Jack,
like admiral, or
the
royal military, I guess, whatever. Yeah.
The general. I don't know. Like, I don't want to like inflate their ego anymore. The next down cult leader, down is like Helen Joyce and Mayor Forstater and that kind of stuff. So it kind of just comes across as like being such a cult wacko that you're reading porn created by the characters created by your cult leader. Her argument was that she was doing research for an article about how trans people, lots of trans boys are actually convinced to become trans by reading erotica. And she posted an article about it, which she wrote 2 years ago, suggesting that, which is a little bit odd to be doing a research about an article you wrote 2 years ago, but it's also a little bit odd, extra odd, if you're alleging that some kids are becoming trans because they're reading Harry Potter, just to re-emphasize that. They're becoming trans from reading Harry Potter erotica. But also, I haven't read it. I haven't looked at it. But from what everyone else on Twitter is saying, including people I trust who have looked at it, they were saying that all of the characters in this particular story are cis and straight. And in fact, the theme of the entire thing, the work of art in question is called Mudblood Bitch.
No.
And apparently, allegedly, the theme is someone who lusts after and falls in love with someone they consider subhuman and lesser, which is an extra kind of layer on top of a gender critical person reading this. It's just all a bit... So, basically, do you think this is okay?
I love the defense of I'm doing research, because it has literally been an internet meme for like as long as the internet has been a thing, when you're caught watching porn, being like, I'm doing research for a project. Like, I think the first time I heard that was in like 2006 or something, like back when YouTube was like just starting. That is so embarrassing.
I actually think I've got a cartoon on it already from like 2020 or something, because there was some other incident where some other gender critical was caught reading some trans porn thing, and they said it was research. Yeah, like it's already been done.
And the thing is too, I think I'm a big advocate that like what you like in fantasy doesn't necessarily have to represent like your real preferences or anything you'd want to happen in reality. So like you could very easily dismiss this of being like, yep, it's embarrassing and cringy, but like, I don't know what to tell you. I like what I like, or something. You could be very human about it, but of course, instead, it has to be, no, I'm actually doing an expose on how the transgenders are transing because of this porn or whatever. And like, there's just, there's no like academic approach or anything like that. It is just, let me read porn and come to conclusions.
I think my favorite tweet on this was actually by Krista Peterson, who I mentioned earlier. And she was like, the claim that Helen Joyce was doing research doesn't land to me at all, because I've read her book. And like, she didn't do any research at all for the book, like for the entire book. So the idea that Helen Joyce of all people is doing research, it's like when you ask like a 2-year-old what they're doing, they're like, I'm busy. It's like, You busy?
Yeah.
I don't think so. What have you got going on in your life? It's like Helen Joyce doing research. Like, come on.
Oh my goodness.
I know everyone's going to want to have a big argument about when it's okay to like what porn and reading it in what situations, and I think the key parts here are that she's claiming that it's anything to do with trans people when it's straight and cis people. That is like point number one. Point number two is allegedly, I haven't read it, all of the characters involved in this are under 18. And point three is it was publicly enough on a train that someone could see it, like from seats away. So it's not even like, small like, because you can't usually read what's on someone's phone even in the seat next to you. So
I mean, like, I'm inclined to say, like, like you pointed out at the beginning, if it's not super obvious, I don't know if I particularly care. If you're doing writing, obviously don't watch porn in public. That's so irresponsible and violates everyone's consent around you. But in and of itself, I don't particularly object to reading erotica in public. But yeah, the having it be so extra large and coming from this particular person is
and it being kids.
Yeah, right in that aspect too. But okay, we have got some announcements to get to, that we're going to take your calls. We do have some callers on the line, but there are a few lines open as well. So if you would like to call in, please give us a shot. We're even having some people struggle with audio. We've had tech issues like crazy the last month, so I'm really sorry for all that stuff, but not much we can do. All right, so coming up next on the line, this Saturday is going to be the first debate show on the line, and that will be N Boss with Matt Dillahunty debating William Albrecht on the bodily ascension of Jesus. The assets I've made for that are also Jimmy and I have collaboratively made are so cool. I'm so excited. It looks really cool, and I think it's going to be really fun. And it's an interesting format. It'll be cool to see how it goes. On the Sunday show will be Jimmy and Matt at 2 p.m. Central Time. Erica Guts It Gibbon will be hosting Skep Talk on Monday at 6 p.m. Central Time. Eve Was Friend will be back for Chewed Gum with guest Sarah Trans Violet, and that's 6 p.m. Central Time. Also, I want to address really quickly, I've heard some people who are concerned about Chewed Gum being a women's show and potential trans exclusivity problems, particularly because in the description, we have described it as a show for women, or the hosts will be women and or people who were raised as girls. And that raised as girls thing got under some people's craw. But the point is that it's women and or people who were raised as girls, specifically because there's probably some non-binary people or transmasculine people who might want to comment on the experience of being raised as a girl in a patriarchal religion. And we didn't want to exclude those people if they wanted to talk on that issue.
That's quite, like, it brings a good perspective, because if you want to hear about how patriarchy and religion intersect, then hearing from women, cis women, is obviously very important, but also trans people have a really good take on that, and trans people from both all the sides are going to have an interesting take on this. And also, so my intersex people, who maybe even, I mean, potentially there might be a case where we have a cis man who's like, I'm intersex, and actually this really came up in this religion and I was treated in a certain way and blah, blah, blah. And then it could be relevant to the show too. So, but the point is, lots of people, and this is the gender critical way of looking at things, they just want to categorize people based on something. I want all the people who are women. I want all the people who have XY chromosomes. No, we're trying to, like the whole point into having women-only shows is to address misogyny, and when it's about religion, that's a real big intersection that's really important, and there's lots of perspectives on it, and a trans man is going to have a perspective on that.
Yeah, so, I appreciate how the language might have confused some people, but I think you'll find if you read it, it's actually... I had the same concern initially when I read it, but when I had considered, the inclusion of non-binary and people and trans men who aren't women but might want to comment on that experience, it seemed obvious to me that it was important to include that. So just to clear that up. Also, I'm set to be the host on the 26th of March. So trans people are very much welcome and included. But yes,
Can't believe they're letting a biological male onto the show.
I know. So almost done with announcements. Next Wednesday's Hang Up, we'll have Dara back, who was canceled due to tech issues last week. And then Katie and I will be back here again next week. So with that, we have callers on the line. I don't want to make them wait any longer. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, let's bring in Mac. Pronouns are she, her in West Virginia. Mac, you are... Oop, it's taking a second to bring her in. Come on, Colin Studio. Don't do this to me right now. Wait, hold on. Maybe if I do it from this computer.
Says on mine that Mac
There we
is
go.
here.
All right, Mac from West Virginia. Pronouns are she, her. Mac, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hi, Arden. Hi, Katie.
Hey.
Hi. How can we
Hi,
help?
how are you guys?
Great,
Doing all
thanks.
right.
I had a question. I had the wonderful opportunity of spending time with one of my kids' childhood friends, who is a trans woman, and she was delightful and wonderful. But then I came home and spent some time with my best friend, and she kept misgendering, and even though I corrected and all that kind of thing, and having spent time with her and who she is now, it hurt my heart for her. But also, I want to keep my friendship too. So I just some suggestions on how to navigate this.
Sure. Do you think... So I guess the first question I have is, do you think that your friend is... And I do think this is a relevant question to ask. Do you think your friend is one of these devoted, malicious, transphobic wackos who, strongly believes that trans women are men and they'll, go down and die on that hill? Or do you think that she's just clumsy and ignorant and not really paying attention and doesn't really care? Or somewhere in between?
Is it Yeah, that was my question. Is it possible to be somewhere in between? Because she doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but she's kind of like on the hill that she was born male, so therefore she will always be male in her mind.
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's interesting, though, that you say she doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but it's pretty clear that she has decided that she doesn't care if she does hurt someone's feelings. Like, she doesn't want to, but if the things she says do, she just doesn't care.
She doesn't want to be seen hurting someone's feelings, not that she doesn't want to hurt someone's feelings. I guess it's what I'd point out. I think the reason I asked that question is because if someone is ignorant or even slightly a bit of a dickhead, then they can be won over for sure often by just being exposed to a trans person or by learning something about us or just through constant talking about them and stuff. But if there's some wacko cultist, which sometimes, I don't want to malign your friend, but some people have really lost their minds over this issue, and some people do go from 0 to 60 in quite a short space of time, especially if they end up being confronted over it. And they do end up losing their minds and becoming this kind of irredeemable mess. And I guess if you think your friend has lost their mind over this, a gender critical person or something, then the best thing to do might be and you don't want to lose them as a friend, the best thing to do might be just to make your position clear and then also make it clear that you don't ever want to talk about it with them. But if they are someone who you think is potentially reasonable or who might listen, would be to just bear in mind that they're probably not going to change their mind overnight, and to just keep slowly on at them and give them a chance to be wrong. I think that there are a lot of people who have only ever conceptually thought about trans people and have never encountered them, or worse, the ways in which they have encountered us are via Fox News or some 90s TV thing or something like that, where we are just portrayed as effectively drag queens but bad at makeup.
Right.
And if that's the case, then, it takes a while to undo that. And the best thing really that she could do to undo that is to meet a trans person. But if she's then going to misgender them and be horrible, then you don't want to be like, oh, you've got to meet my friend, and then your friend's got to sit through a load of bullshit. But sometimes, you know, you might even be able to get her to watch a film that has a trans actress in without her even noticing or it being a point. Like, it doesn't have to be a trans-focused film. Or you might be able to talk about some experience that your friend has had without highlighting the fact that she's trans until later on in the story, in a way that she might be able to like think, oh, you know, I've experienced that. Like, if your friend, or even you could even share a story for me and Arden and say how, you know, I've had a situation where I've been like followed home by some guy, or where I've been sexually assaulted. And that's something that lots of women have experienced. And then when you say, oh, yeah, you know, and she's a trans woman, so obviously they experience the same things, it might kind of wake her mind up to the idea that it's not just like, you know, the stereotype of a trans person that she might have in her mind. But it is kind of difficult. I guess one thing as well I would say is lots of people can struggle with just getting pronouns right. When she says like, oh, you'll always be a male to me, like that to me says a bit more of a ideological position. In that case, she's going to need to be talked out of it a bit more. But some people really are just bad at pronouns and getting someone from moved. Like, some people have really strong boxes in their mind, and I think a lot of people do, because that's how society brings you up, of which box someone's in. They are a man or they are a woman. And if they meet a trans person post-transition, then they might actually put them in the right box. But when they meet someone before transition and then they transition, they really struggle to move them. And I just thought I'd say that because I'm going to call out my friend on the show. I saw one of my friends who I've known since secondary school the other day, and we had a really great time, but they misgendered me in front of someone. And I think it's the first time I've been misgendered in like 5 years. And it was just so fucking weird. Like, what are you doing? And they were like, oh, sorry. Like, but it's because we've known each other since we were 13 and we haven't seen each other for the last 5 years or whatever. So in their mind, they obviously haven't got that to work yet, but they will next time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to admit that I caught myself because her parents still call her they, because in the process of transitioning, she used they. And so I caught myself doing that as well. And then it was like, she, her. So, yeah, when you've known someone their entire life and then you're getting to meet them as who they are now, it can be hard, but I don't even know that my friend would be willing to meet who she is now.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, like, I'm all for, you know, there are some relationships where you just have to set boundaries and just agree to not talk about certain things. But also, in my view, when there's this strong of like an ideological disagreement on like how to treat people, I have a hard time, and I'm not saying you should stop being friends with this person, but I'm saying I have a hard time interacting with those people, and even giving them like any semblance of my attention. I don't know. I guess I think it would be maybe incumbent upon you to really iron out exactly where her beliefs lie and how you feel about that. Like, is, you know, if she's really more extreme than you're realizing, is that a problem for you? And if not, what are you going to do about navigating that? Because I really think the only option is to try to lay down some sort of boundaries, and try to preserve the friendship over, you know, what your like beliefs differences are. But I think for a lot of people in, you know, modern times, it's become an increasingly bigger problem in maintaining relationships with such stark ideological divides on like human rights.
Yeah. Human rights, religious beliefs are not, yeah. We are having a more difficult time navigating that, but I have hope that people can change because
Yeah.
I'm old and I've changed. So
Sure.
Good. It is good to always change, to like keep making progress. Yeah, don't write off a friend. I think it's easier to write off people who are, acquaintances or just someone you barely even know. Like if you first meet someone for the first time at a party and they're transphobic, who cares? But if it's like your best friend, then you can spend time on them. Like if your best friend suddenly got into anti-vax or QAnon or something, you would spend time trying to get them out of it. And I think it can be the same here. And yeah, just allow them space to be wrong. And
I think
just remember, it's better they're saying all this bullshit to you than to a trans person they've just met. So
that's true. I think you can also maybe try to appeal to her in like, hey, like I really value our friendship and I want to maintain our friendship, but I've noticed that, when we're talking about trans people or maybe other issues, because I usually, these things don't usually occur in a vacuum. So I'm assuming there's other beliefs or values where this might leak into. Like on these issues, you think this way, and maybe it concerns me about the way we're growing as people, and like I don't want to like lose the connection we have. So like maybe just like explicitly asking for help bridging that gap. I think sometimes that sort of appeal can be really useful to people and sentimental, especially if you are really close.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That makes sense to my brain.
Cool.
yeah.
Well, maybe give it a shot and call us back and let us know how it goes.
Yeah, let us know how it goes.
Okay, well, I appreciate you taking my call and spending some time with me, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Mac. You as well.
Thanks, Mac. Good luck with that. It's
Bye.
difficult.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
That sounds like Mac is a good friend to have, both as a trans person and as a cis person who's a bit of a dickhead.
Yeah, it's interesting coming from the position of the cis person trying to appeal. Like, so in the Reptile Expo space, there are a lot of right-wing sort of people. And while I'd never hide that I'm trans, some people there do know that I'm trans. I don't have trans pride pins on every time, right? And a few of them, I'm quite confident don't know because they made their political values known and they've made it clear that they like me. And I'm like, I don't think you would feel that way if you actually knew. But I kind of have taken that as like an advantage. I want to continue to make them like me so that when they inevitably do find out, it can maybe rock them a little bit foundationally on like how they feel about these issues. But I feel like for me as a trans person, I've spent my whole life taking those hits where it's kind of easier for me to do that. It's interesting to think of being the cis person in that perspective and how that makes things probably a lot more difficult. Yeah.
But then I guess it's similar to if you meet someone who's a bit of a racist and you have the choice to either tell them to fuck off to their face or try and win them over. And like, you've got to decide where the line is and what's the net good. Like, what can you do most as a white person to make the world better? Because sometimes telling someone to fuck off is the best thing, and sometimes trying to sit someone down and over the course of weeks and months stop them from being a dickhead is the best thing. It's hard to make that call sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've got some good calls on the line. We have 6-4 and we've got 9-6. Have you read either of them? I think both of those would be quite good.
6-4? Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, I'm just updating the titles thing. All right, 6-4. Let's take David in Italy. Pronouns are he, him. David, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Okay. Hi. Yes, my name is David, and I have a question. My position is very complex, but I will try to keep it short. So
Good stuff.
basically, I don't. So basically,
Go ahead.
I don't
Sorry.
believe. Yeah, there is a bit of delay. Basically, I don't believe that all trans women are women. I think that if you like change the definition or the meaning of a word, you can say that some trans women are women. I'm fine with all the position except for the self-ID one. In fact, if a woman can produce sperm, engage in manhood, be masculine and do basically look like feminine and do basically look masculine and do basically everything what a man do. When there is a question that is how can you differentiate between men identities and women identities? How can you prove that these identities are different and not synonymous?
Right. So, David, I guess my first question would be, if it's not the person themselves who's deciding,
Yes.
then we have two other options, really. Either it is objective / defined by a god. Maybe we'll separate them up. There's three other options. Either a god decides, it is objective regardless of a god, or society decides. So which of those three are you arguing for?
Okay, so there is, I think when we use words, we usually have an empirical evidence, an empirical reference. For example, when you say black, you may end up with a circular reasoning and say, but black is black. But when you use that word, you are referring to a specific empirical information. In this case, it is the empirical fact that the visual information, the visual color, the visual experience of black, but cannot be put into words. So I think with self-ID is similar, but there is a problem. But if we say that women are women not because, for example, of behaviors, because of looks, all the social stuff that we constructed, but we say that women are women because they self-identify as such, then you lack any empirical reference, any empirical information that can prove that men and women are different.
Okay,
just a second.
Yes. Well, I think this is important to cut in here because I have two points to make here. One is there are plenty of aspects about people, both about their identity and just about them, that we only get from self-ID, like something like their sexuality. We know that sexuality is a real component of humans. Like it's a whatever Arden usually says, a durable construct in your mind. You can't change someone's sexuality just with brainwashing or a pill or whatever. But we don't know what it is. We can't measure it without asking someone. And that, like, we can get some empirical evidence. In fact, asking them and them telling you is some form of evidence. That doesn't mean that they won't lie. That doesn't mean they can't be delusional. But we do know that out of all the ways to find out what someone's sexuality is, the best way generally is to ask them. People do lie about the sexuality all the time. In fact, gay people often have to lie about the sexuality to survive. But so I think just saying, oh, well, we can't measure it doesn't necessarily make it bad or worthless. But on the point about the measuring thing is, we can say, oh, well, if we don't ground it in something we can measure, then then it's bad. But the problem is in order for that to work as an argument, you can't say, if we don't ground it in something we can measure, it's bad, therefore we can't do it the other way, because you need to have something to measure in order to ground it on something you can measure. So I don't know if I've explained that the greatest way, but basically what I would say is, how do we measure it? If it's not down to the person to decide, what is there to measure? And we can say things like, because it sounds to me, what usually someone who comes in with the view, some trans women are women, they usually have the position, oh, well, if you fit into society of, if most people in society would say, oh, that is a woman or that is a man or whatever, then that is what you are. And that's a kind of a consistent position, but you need is that your position is the first question? And if so, we're not really measuring it. All we're doing is a different form of self-ID. And instead of self-ID, it's just society ID, which is equally non-empirical.
Right.
Maybe even less so.
Okay.
And if I could cut in before you go, David, I do want you to talk. I was going to ask the same question, but I also want to point out that, if we're using the society definition, I think we would agree that that's fundamentally flawed, because there are many people who might identify as a man who could look in past to most of society as a woman. There are some very well-known examples of these people. And so are we saying that despite the fact that these individuals might say, no, I am a cisgender man, because society has decided that it doesn't matter what they say, that they're just women, right? So it seems to me that the self-ID is the only approach that could accurately assess what someone's identity is.
Okay, I have a response for everything you just said. Now, the problem with sexuality, the problem with sexuality is that, in fact, I think the other day you talked about how much identity can be innate or not. So the problem with sexuality is that it is not defined by itself by a belief system. What I mean, if, for example, you are now we say homosexual, but the more appropriate term, I think, is androphilic, but is you are attracted to male, masculine-like feature. So if you are attracted to those feature, but you say, for example, that you are not androphilic, you are 100% genophilic, but in reality you have a feedback in your brain that indeed that don't make you genophilic, but indeed make you aroused or attracted to men, then you are effectively lie. Even if we don't measure the fact that you have the belief that you are not gay doesn't make you necessary, but believe true. While with trans women, if, for example, a trans woman believe that is not a woman, that belief automatically justify. Sorry, I worded poorly. If a trans woman does not believe is a man, then that belief justify the fact that is a woman. The problem is indeed with even if we don't have way to measure sexuality, there is an empirical reference that go beyond a person's belief. While the arguments made by the self-ID position are basically, they define women by a belief system, which lack empirical reference. Now,
I hear the argument you're making there. So just to kind of summarize it, you're saying that someone could be gay, but could believe they're not. Whereas because your claim is that self-ID is just based on the person's belief, it's not possible to be a trans woman and not believe it. And I guess I would break up, or to not possible to be a woman and not believe it. So I would break up the what a trans person or a cis person is into more parts than this, because I think there is all of the same analogs with sexuality here. So I grew up thinking that being trans was something that was disgusting and wrong. And so I definitely grew up thinking that I wasn't a trans woman or a trans person or a woman. And if you had asked me if I was a man or a woman when I was 21, even, I would have said a man, without even questioning it. But I also, that whole time, had been suffering from gender dysphoria. And the way you hear some people describe this is, I was fighting it, but I was a woman inside all along. And I don't necessarily describe it like that, because I think that people will read it in a bad faith way, and it doesn't necessarily describe it the best way, but that does speak to me. If someone's like, did you feel like you were a woman inside, but you were in denial? I'd be like, well, yeah, that does kind of describe how I felt this. And it's the same with someone who is gay or straight, who is hiding it from themselves even, or is in denial, or even like there is a belief system in one sense to being gay, in that some people really do believe that it's wrong and they shouldn't be having these feelings, or even that these feelings are like temptation from the devil or whatever, that it's not a real natural state of humans, so therefore it's not part of them and they have to like overcome it with the power of God or something, and they don't just see it as straightforward attraction. And in that case, you know, they were really gay all along, but they were in denial about it. And that is the mirror here. But where it goes on to then, what is the definition of a woman, or who really counts as a woman and stuff, it is again the same with gay people. If someone is, we could say, oh, it's a gay person in denial. And if you ask them, what is your sexuality? They'll say, I am a straight person. And you'd be like, well, we've done this magic test and we have knowledge that truthfully actually you're a gay person in denial. Or even maybe a more obvious example is someone who is an ex-gay who believes that they have prayed away the gay with the power of Jesus or something. I'm pretty confident that all of the ex-gays are not ex-gay, not actually no longer gay. But at the same time, they're the only ones who know the experience of their attraction. They're the only ones who can really, they're the closest to being able to actually measure this. And if someone tells me they're not gay, how could I possibly say, oh, well, actually you are. I know more about who you are than you do. And for sure I can accept that people can lie and they can be delusional and they can be in denial, but that's the same with being a man or a woman or being trans or not. So I don't think you can just purely put this down to, like, you can separate the self-ID-ness of both of them, because in both of them there is a real aspect of your brain which is influenced by nature and nurture, and then there is your understanding of that, and then society's perception of that. For both of them.
There is a problem with that position, because I don't think that you have... so, first of all, I do believe that there are indeed in trans women some predisposition, like predisposition in behaviors, predisposition in like anxiety, predisposition like in certain preferences. All these constructs can be innate, but this construct by itself does not define self-ID. Someone can behave feminine and still identify like a man, like you said. Someone can have a certain preference and still identify as a man. The problem with that is that it increases the likelihood of identifying in a certain way, because I think personally that self-ID requires anyway epistemic confidence. How much something you believe is true. For example, you need to think that, like, for example, you have a certain preference, you behave in a certain way, and you see a group that behave in a certain way, have a certain preference, and you justify being that part of that group based on this tendency or based of your will to have a certain body type and stuff like that. Because I don't believe that you have the abilities to know the experience of self-ID or consciousness of other women. Meaning that you likely relied on...
But, Jinx.
Yes. Arden, you go. Arden, you go.
Yeah, no, I need to jump in here. So, I kind of half agree with what you're saying, David, in that I think there may in fact be some truth to the matter about whether or not you're gay or whether or not you're trans. I'm not convinced that's something we could ever have access to. But what I do think is you were talking about this epistemic confidence about like our own identity based on this self-assessment. But I think if you're actually going to hold that level of scrutiny, you're going to find your ability to interact with people completely unwinding, because that couldn't just possibly stop with trans people. You would then have to question how people have epistemic confidence in my favorite color, my favorite ice cream flavor, every internal self-assessment, because likewise... No, wait, hold on, David. Hold on, David.
Okay.
We've let you talk a lot.
Yes.
Because much like with sexuality and gender, there's probably some sort of neurological fact of the matter that, while we don't have access to it, probably could theoretically at some point in the future be discovered to say, this person has the vanilla ice cream enjoying brain, right? But that's not something we have access to. And I'm not convinced that's something we'll ever really have access to, at least in any reasonable time in the future. How could you possibly prevent that, the questioning of people's epistemic confidence on their gender from unwinding down to the inability to assess your internal state at all?
Okay, so first of all, I need to clarify that I have usually in real life, I think I have a prescriptive position. Indeed, like indeed, I think like if, for example, you tell me that if this person identifies as a woman and I call them as a man, and doing that lead them to suicide, be unhappy, etc. Obviously, at least for me, obviously, I have no reason to not be polite or kind and lead them for to a negative outcome. But this doesn't mean that I actually believe, I'm actually convinced that they are women because they say so. Because,
Okay.
For example, if someone...
So I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt again, okay? But this is good. I actually appreciate your answer because I think we're actually now getting to the heart of the issue. So it's a really common misconception when people have issue with self-ID that they think that to say that someone self-IDs as a woman is to declare that I know that they are in fact, like as a fact of the matter, like we were just talking about, a woman. When somebody tells me they identify as a woman, I'm not claiming to say, yes, I accept that their claim is indicative of the truth of reality, and therefore I know for a fact that they are a woman. What I'm saying is that the most reliable pathway to knowing whether or not someone is a woman is their self-report. I'm not convinced we could ever have access to the truth of the matter on these things, right?
I don't think there is one. There isn't an objective definition of man and woman. Like people might believe in some ontological truth of whether someone truly is, but there isn't a truth value to this because it's a societal decision.
Sure. In my mind, we're social animals, and sociology is so ingrained into our biology. I think you could argue that there is probably some sort of fact of the matter about a lot of these sociological things. But I agree that I don't think we could ever have, like, I think the end result of both of our beliefs is virtually the same. Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying self-ID is not to claim that when someone says I am a woman, that has like rewritten the fabric of reality, right? And that some like ontology has changed by their proclamation. That's not what's being said. What people are saying is, I cannot possibly know the content of your mind better than you do. So when you tell me you're a woman, I'm allowed to have doubts about it. I'm allowed to be skeptical about it. But what I'm not allowed to do, well, you're allowed to do whatever you want. But what it's completely unreasonable to do is to question that you know the contents of their mind better than they do.
So I guess...
yeah.
Sorry, David. I just wonder if I can come in from a slightly different angle to your last point. So about sort of the kind of feedback of it and how people view themselves. I guess, like if we do an extreme example, I think if I was the only person on Earth and I'd never met any other people, I would still feel some kind of weirdness about my genitals that I had at birth, in a way that I don't think a cis person, if they were the only person on Earth, would do. I wouldn't have anything to compare it to. But if I was then shown, like, if I lived in some kind of sci-fi world where I was still the only person, and I had all the knowledge and stuff of what bodies could look like, but no knowledge of society, and then this is really abstract and theoretical, but just trying to communicate the position, I would be like, oh yeah, I'd rather have those sex characteristics than these ones. I can't explain to you why. I don't know why that is the kind of, if I had the choice, if I was just recreating my body using this sci-fi machine, I'll just pick those ones because that just feels like the right choice to me. But that doesn't necessarily mean I would say I am a woman or I am a man or whatever, because in this world where there are no other people, that doesn't really mean anything. But if then another load of people showed up and they said, we're going to sort people, or maybe they start sorting themselves into society, into groups, I would feel like, oh, this group kind of represents me more than this group. If everyone was splitting on their preference for music, or the people who liked heavy music, I probably feel like I fit in more with them. If now they're splitting themselves on other things, there are lots of things that people split themselves on society, I would end up just naturally going into these certain groups, not randomly, but if we just had people splitting off, there would be some that I would feel more in common with and more that I fitted in with, and some that I didn't. And without words for these, I mean, it's hard to even describe what they are, but as they start happening, we can start describing what these groups are. And that is the point at which the definition of, where we start arguing about the definition of a man or a woman comes in, not a few stages before about which sex characteristics someone feels like they want. And this is before what preferences someone might have in a gendered world. So I guess I'm saying here is what I like does inform who I get on with, for sure. And I like a mixture of things which society says is for boys and society says is for girls. And that means I can get on with men and women across those hobbies quite well. But I do feel like generally I have at the moment more friends who are women, and that's probably always going to be the case. And that is, again, is informed by our hobbies and our upbringings and how we view society and all of this kind of stuff. But I wouldn't say that is the cause for me saying I am a woman. From the other side, I also have I had this drive, you could call it gender dysphoria, whatever you want to call it, to transition, and transitioning has made that better. It's made my life better and easier, and that has changed some of my sex characteristics, as well as things like how I present myself. But that drive, I don't feel, is informed by what my preferences were, or who I like to hang out, or even, I don't think it's entirely driven by how I see myself in society. I think that is a factor in it, because social transition, I would rather fit in with a group of women than a group of men. But I don't think that's the whole of it. So I guess when we're talking about where we draw the line for definitions and what is relevant to the definition of a woman, I don't think what people like or what they do, what their preferences are, should factor into the definition of a woman. But in reality, in society, it does to some extent. And I think that what sex characteristics someone has doesn't really need to. At least some sex characteristics are less important than others. But in reality, in society, it does to some extent. But when it depends, like you were saying, whether you're being prescriptive or descriptive. If I'm describing how society sees what a woman is, then the reality is, yes, society sees some trans women as women and some as men, and sees some as a separate group altogether. Or in fact, I think there's multiple groups of trans women, how society views us. But if I don't think society is always right. I think society is wrong about a lot of things, and I want to kind of change how society sees things. And that's why I have these discussions, I guess. I don't know if that was a bit of a roundabout answer or if it wasn't an answer at all, but does that address anything?
I just have to say one thing, David, 5 seconds before you go. One thing, 5 seconds before you go. We do have full lines, and I do want to get to some of those other callers. So if you could maybe give some last thoughts, and we'll try to put a cap on this call. But this is a really good call, so thank you. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Okay. So the last two things very fast. So the first thing is that indeed I was bringing up that hypothetical, because indeed in that scenario, like I said, I do believe that you maintain some sort of feminine behavior. If you have a natural predisposition to it, you may feel a weird way to if you indeed have a natural predisposition to it, but you will maintain certain preferences. But in that situation, you indeed didn't identify as a woman, but it is like in your example, it is eventually the environment that eventually defined in a determined way your identity. In fact, if, for example, we live in a society where, for example, women look like men, but they have the genitals of their respective sex. Vice versa for men. Some people, I ask to various trans women, some trans women have more of a social dysphoria and will still engage with the people that follow the specific social role, while others have more of a body dysphoria, and they answer me that they prefer to follow the people that have the physical aspect that they prefer, wish, I don't know how to put it. The last thing, and I will stop, is that there are a lot of consequences if the women identities self-ID is in it, because I think there is a interplay of factors, but self-ID cannot be determined by itself by biology, because if it does, there is a major question, that is why evolution have led women to identify as such if a person can behave like a man, have the same preference of a man, but still identify as a woman. Why evolution would do that? What's the point?
Well, just to address that last question very quickly before, evolution doesn't always have a point, and it just kind of does stuff. And sometimes it gives us a benefit enough that it gets passed on and it gets really optimized, like being able to breathe oxygen or having eyes. That, you know, humans quite reliably do those things, and they're quite important for our survival. But there's loads of stuff we do which is just complete nonsense, which hasn't benefited our survival, both in terms of physical structures and behaviors. So I think if we look at something and be like, why would evolution have done that? That isn't necessarily an argument against it, because evolution does do weird stuff. But your other question, please do call in again, because I think this has been a really good call, David.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk to you again if you'd like to call back.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the call, and you are very polite, kind.
Thanks,
Thank you.
David.
And you.
Talk to you later. Bye. Wow. A caller who holds maybe arguably an anti-trans position who called me polite. I'm like blushing over here.
Arden, you're slipping. What's going on?
I know. I think I was called nuts last time, so it's crazy. All right, who do you want to take next? We've got full lines. I did cap the lines because we have full lines and it is already 3:15. I know, Katie, you don't like to go super late, so hopefully we can get to everyone. I'm going to try to get to everyone, but...
Yeah. If we're going to get to everyone, I don't mind, but maybe 9-6 next.
Okay. Let's talk to Anna in Indiana. Pronouns are she, her. Anna, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hi. Thanks for having me on the show. So I recently had a discussion with a person who happened to be trans. This was over the internet, so not a face-to-face conversation, so a little bit of a different type of conversation. What they were claiming is that apparently Christians and Muslims, and in general religious people in the U.S. Are in fact very progressive, and that a very slight minority has problems with LGBTQ, and that we should not be demonizing religious people. So as a staunch atheist, I jumped in and wanted to say that, like, no, I feel like religion is harmful, and there are certain reasons, even if it's not the classical religions, I do think religious thought, which specifically I'm talking about the supernatural beliefs, I think is harmful. And I don't know if I'm being too harsh on religious people, or if my my assessment of the situation is wrong, because it could be the case. The way they were describing is, oh, most people are very vanilla, very, they might not. Yeah, so I think the argument came down to that they believe anybody who self-IDs as a Christian is a Christian, as an example. Anybody who self-IDs as a specific religion is of that religion. And I just disagree, but I don't know if I'm wrong in a sense, in that sense. So I want to hear your opinions, yeah.
I think there's some truth to the notion that while people might claim some very strong feelings on certain transgender issues, I do think when you really put people's values to the test, most people care far more about their day-to-day well-being than anything that LGBT people do generally. However, I think you could probably just Google like Pew Research Christian transgender and probably find a number of polls evaluating the beliefs of Christian people on transgender things. And when it comes to, do Christians just accept the self-ID of other Christians? No, absolutely not. It is like a notorious joke that all Christians are always like, or not all Christians. There are some Christian denominations that are very progressive and that probably are really accepting. I mean, the Unitarian Universalists, the whole notion behind that church is that like everyone has like a piece of God, man. That kind of like hippie Christian kind of belief system. And those people definitely exist, but to say that that's the majority of Christians, I think I do not see the evidence for that. I mean, just like I said, Googling Christian Pew Research transgender. There's a poll that was done in 2017, 21, and 22 on U.S. Protestants believing gender is determined by sex at birth. And it seems like a majority on at least all white evangelicals believing that. It seems the same as white non-evangelicals, Black Protestants, a slight majority on Catholics. And then when it comes to religiously unaffiliated atheists and agnostics, the majority of them do not agree that gender is determined by sex at birth. So, I mean, that's just, I found that on Google in 2 seconds.
I did the same thing, and mine came up with supporting gay marriage, and unaffiliated is like 80% support, and white Christian evangelical Protestants is like 30% support. So there are differences here. For, like in terms of do most Christians support LGBT rights in general? Globally, no. In the US, no. In some communities, probably yes. Like there might be some demographic of certain movements or certain denominations, etc., which are. But like statistically, no. Religious people are more likely to oppose LGBT rights in the USA, and I would presume globally. But also on this kind of like who really counts as a Christian, like Arden says, I mean, like it's such a classic. If you look up a lot of like creationist, the world is coming to an end, believe Jesus is coming back, kind of wacko YouTubers, they all think that the Pope is the Antichrist. Like it's such a classic to say that Catholics are demons and the Pope is the real devil and all this kind of stuff. And from my point of view, Catholics are just Christians, but they're not from the point of view of a lot of Christians. So they all certainly have big arguments about it. But I just think, again, like, I mean, if someone's like, I am a Christian, but I don't believe Jesus at all, like, I don't believe anything Jesus, I'll be like, well, I feel like part of the definition of a Christian is you have some kind of Jesus thing going on. I don't know, but that's kind of a corner case, because the point is, statistically, the majority of people who call themselves Christians share some kind of view about Jesus, even if they argue amongst themselves, and statistically that group is less likely to support LGBT people. So, and certainly this... Yeah. Sorry, you go on.
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. So I think the reason why I was so adamant about trying to push, my opinion or at the very least, I was trying to defend my opinion, right? Because I view religion as inherently harmful. And what their opinion is that even if there's certain people that consider themselves religious, it's not inherently bad. Like, oh, let the people be religious. What's it to you? As long as they allow me to be, to act how I want and like to have my freedoms that I want. And I couldn't quite. And I brought up the examples that you said, right? Like, statistically, if you're more religious, you're more likely to be more conservative, to vote more conservative. What they brought up is that, like, oh, but that's not true, because you could be a Christian that cherry picks things that they want, which
Right.
could be aligned with progressive values, and then yeah.
So sorry. I think there is a kind of a difference between like on an individual level and at a group level. Like statistically, Christians are as a group less likely to support LGBT rights. But if you were to meet a Christian and they were being nice and maybe they're at a gay wedding and they're standing next to a trans person having a good conversation, and you find out they're Christian, you're like, oh, you probably don't support LGBT rights. That's actually kind of a bullshit form of prejudice, because just because statistically as a group Christians might be like that doesn't necessarily mean that they are even. I mean, maybe we could dig deeper and be like, oh, well, actually evangelicals and Catholics are more likely to, but actually if you're a whatever, I don't know, the denominations of Christian, there might be one specific denomination of Christian which is more likely to support LGBT people than atheists even, and then it's like, well, where do you draw the lines and stuff? But when you meet a single person, looking at these kind of group statistics is kind of meaningless, really, because religion itself, I would say, is innately harmful at a societal level. Religion as a concept, because it controls people and gets people to vote for politically bad stuff, and also teaches people things which ruin their lives and teaches them to believe in blind faith and stuff. But a person being religious, an individual being religious, I don't think is inherently bad. That it doesn't necessarily affect their life negatively or the people around them negatively. Because I know it, like, it's a very classic atheist, like, internet argument position to say, well, if someone believes in a blind faith position, then that might creep into their other things, and your beliefs influence your actions. But the thing is, if someone just kind of quietly believes in a god generally to themselves, but they don't really, that's it, then I just don't think it matters. Like, it just doesn't matter to me. There's not a real, like, theoretically it could cause them to make a bad decision in a certain hypothetical scenario, but in real life it's not affecting me, it's not affecting anyone else, so I actually don't care.
I think there's some room for, like, sorry, Anna, one sec. I was just going to say, I think there's some room for acknowledging, like, generally speaking, I would say I'm an anti-theist. I would love to see a world where Christianity is viewed much like how we view Greek mythology nowadays, at large. But I'm also a realistic person, and I don't think that that's going to happen even within my lifetime, right? So I'm fine with acknowledging that individual Christians can be progressive and can be aligned with my values as a progressive person and can even be my ally in fighting for progressive causes. But yeah, I think if they're arguing that it's wrong to say that Christians as a group have certain characteristics, that's just untrue, because Christians, at a statistical level as a group do have certain characteristics. But much like when we're talking about, the definition of a woman, where you can say, oh, humans at a statistical group level have a bimodal distribution where they primarily fall into two groups. It's also the case that when you zoom down and look on an individual level, it's usually not quite that simple for every single person. And the same thing is true of Christians. Like, I think it's this person is just wrong if they're saying that at a statistical level, you can't say Christians are bigoted because some aren't. That's just factually untrue. But yeah, I mean, if they're saying, like, we should, be allied with the Christians who are progressive because we can't abolish Christianity tonight, and we probably should have some sort of common cause to work towards, like working against Christian nationalism, then I totally agree with that. Like, I think that's There has to be some room for nuance. Now, like, that this is totally excluding the fact that I often have trouble personally as an individual making friends with even progressive Christians because I, as an atheist fucking internet debate know-it-all dickhead, feel compelled to like get into the conversation with them. But like, if I was able to resist that, I think I could totally have like a lot of alliances with some progressive Christian people. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Anna. Go ahead.
I know. Sorry, just on that, Arden. Sorry to cut you off, Anna. I just wanted to say I know some Christians who have decent, very good politics, and they love arguing about religion, and we go into it every single time we meet. And I really like. So you kind of. I got some religious. Some of my best friends are religious. Sorry, Anna. You go on.
Yeah. So I think I'm really aware of the fact that I try really hard, when I in person, deal with individual people who are religious, and sometimes it's not even, very obvious, right? Like sometimes it just has to come up in a conversation. It's not like there's a label on people that screams I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim or whatever. I think what I was arguing for is that so I had a problem with their sort of overall view that like we shouldn't even be fighting religion as a whole. And I think that's really because one of the reasons why I think slowly like Christians or Muslims or whatever in specifically US and similar countries are becoming more progressive and becoming more accepting is because of specific societal pressures and policy pressures that have been imposed on them. So, and they were disagreeing about that. They said that religion organically changes or whatever because they're actually the reasoning why they're changing their rules or what they believe in is purely out of they're realizing that now we have to accept gay people because we actually care and like well-being. I think I probably disagree about the reality is that like if we let them be, plenty of countries that are predominantly religious, right? Like when religion actually has almost equal power as the government or is the government, we see so much damage. And I think that's sort of like the idea that I want to push, that like if we just let religion be because you think it's harmless or because you see like progressive churchgoers call themselves Christian, like I feel like that's sort of being a little bit ignorant about like the damage that it has caused before when it did have a lot of power and the type of like pressure that it needed for them to like essentially change their values and views, because a lot of people that they were describing that are progressive are actually younger people who most likely who are more progressive. And so if the church doesn't want to die out, they have to eventually accept a lot of views that it necessarily doesn't harm them at that point to announce that like, we accept gay people, we accept trans people, because they can just get more young people to join their church and continue that whole system, right? And I think that's sort of like my position, but I totally agree about like what you guys are saying, and like obviously we shouldn't be going around and being rude to people just because of their religion. We shouldn't be making assumptions just because of some sort of overarching like group like attributes.
Yeah, I think I agree with you at large. I would say my only last thing I really have to add on this is I have had experiences with some trans people very vehemently defending religion in some online debate spaces. But what, in my experience, what that seems to be from is sort of the awareness. I don't see it as much defending Christians, but I do see it a lot when they're defending Muslims and Islam. And I think that's really what it is kind of like people who experience oppression, being a minority in society, recognizing the oppression of other minorities in society and wanting to be defensive about that, even past the point where it's reasonable. Like, sure, we can acknowledge that Muslims in the US are majority, like, relatively progressive, and that Muslim people probably face unique racist oppression, based on how they look and, like, where they come from and how they dress as a matter of, like, their religious tendencies or whatever. But that we shouldn't, make those judgments or prejudice about those people. That's totally fair, but sometimes it'll cause them to slip into being like, well, actually, the religion of Islam is okay, and even though it says really awful things like Muhammad married
Women
a
are
9-year-old and women are subhuman and you can throw gay people off roofs. That's actually just
Yeah.
the bad one. Like, they will take it too far often, but I think it's they're just going too far with the urge to defend a group that they view as oppressed, which I think is a good instinct, but it can be misguided often, I think. So I definitely relate to this sentiment, and I think it is something you see. But I mean, yeah, if this person was trying to say that religious people as a group are not conservative because some of them are progressive, that's just factually incorrect. So
I think let me just, if you guys have time, and of course, I'll leave in a bit, but I think one of the things that they were arguing is that, like, it's enough for them to call people Christians who are progressive, let's say people who think inherently like, oh, being gay is bad, but like they won't stop somebody from being gay because it's like they view that it's not their responsibility to help them like get away from hell. So they were saying things like, oh, for example, a Christian wouldn't personally want to get an abortion, would never do it themselves, but they're fine with other people getting abortions, right? And so they view that as like okay enough. Which it's essentially like, I wouldn't want my kid to be gay, but other people can be gay. It doesn't bother me.
I think they are slightly different though, because if someone's like, I'm morally opposed to abortions for myself, but I would never stand in the way of another person, even if they were my friend and they came to advice, I would give them objective advice. If someone does that, I don't care.
Yeah.
But if someone is like, I don't support abortions for me or my daughter, but everyone else is fine, then I do have a problem with that, because now they're controlling someone else. So it's like, no son of mine will be gay, well, fuck off. But if you don't want to be gay, then okay, fine, you can like ruin your life if you have attraction only to men and you decide to marry a woman. That does also ruin her life potentially. But if you can marry a lesbian who's in denial, then maybe that's good for both of you. Just don't lie to people. But yeah, I think you can kind of. Oh, sorry. You can kind of theoretically come up with someone who believes something garbage but doesn't act on it, and they do probably exist to some degree. Like if you think, I meet some people who think there is some like sexed soul or whatever, and they think I have a man's soul, but they don't misgender me and they're not voting to ban me from the toilet and whatever. Like, does it affect me really? I don't really care. But are there really people who do that and it doesn't affect their actions at all? I don't know. Hard to say.
Can I ask?
Sorry.
I don't know if it sounds rude. And I'm pro-trans, so hopefully this doesn't come off as weird. But it felt as if that person was trying to equate being religious to being trans, like as if it's the similar frameworks, or like because they were saying, they kept saying religion is a societal construct. Do you think that like that's what they were in essence doing, and not necessarily like I understand about like wanting to defend minorities, and like Islamophobia is like rampant after.
But some people might view it like that. Like there are trans people who are religious, and there are trans people who believe in souls, and there might be some trans people who are like, I just have the wrong soul. Like that's straightforward as that. That's my explanation of how the world works, and like they're wrong. But like if that's how they want to describe it, like I've got other people to be arguing with, really. But if they want to call in and argue on this show, I'd love to talk to them.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
The claim that being trans is like a religion is just factually false, because unlike what the previous caller was saying, there isn't any belief required for someone to be trans. Like you don't need to know anything about it. It's the same with sexuality. There's no belief required. It just is going to happen. If you reset society, it'd re-happen, but none of the major religions would reform. Though religion itself as a concept would probably reform, but also we can test claims from being trans or being gay that we can't for any religions. So that's the difference. But yeah, I think that sometimes also, as well as defending minorities people get into this kind of like internet freedom of speech. I'm a free speech absolutist, and I believe everyone should have the right to believe and say whatever they like. And it's like, well, that's the kind of thing that people say at each other and no one actually sticks to at all as soon as it actually comes to something that affects them. But, you know, in theory, if someone believes their gender is a result of their religion, I believe in freedom freedom of religion enough that I don't want to stop that, and freedom of being who you are enough. Yeah, and like, call in and argue with me, or shut up and go away. Like,
yeah, there are definitely trans people
being
who
trans religion. Like, not you, Anna. I mean, a hypothetical trans person who thought that being trans was yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely interacted with them. They exist, but you know, it's trans people, like every other minority group, are diverse and full of different thoughts and wrong about plenty of things relating to ourselves. And it's, yeah, we're just people. So,
and that's why you should call in this show, because me and Arden are the only right trans people. Every other trans person is wrong. We are the only good ones. All the rest don't deserve real rights, but we deserve real rights. Please love us. And I'm better than Arden.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. We're going to move on to take the rest of our calls, but thank you for calling in.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
You guys have a great day. Bye.
All right, let's talk to 3-2 next, because they've been on the call for 1.5 hours.
Yeah, let's bring in Rhea. Pronouns are she, her in Florida. Rhea.
I made it. I'm on the show. Am I on the show?
You are on the show. You're live on the line. What's going on?
Hey. All right. What's going on? How are we doing?
Good.
Oh my God, I made it on here. I have so many people to thank.
Mom, Jesus,
actually, yeah, right, yeah. My ex for telling me that transitioning was a choice. Thank you. No, but you guys are just talking about a thing that I wasn't going to ask about, but then I realized that I could totally be the person that is wrong. That you tell me to fuck off.
Okay.
Sex souls. Do you want to get into it? I was just going to pitch you guys softball.
Let's
You've had enough
do
of those lately,
This is the atheist trans show. I love it.
Okay, for some background, like I don't believe in like a soul, you know, I'm not like a committed atheist, but I don't have like any strong religious beliefs or anything, but I do feel like I have like an essential spark of uniqueness, right? Like we all have, you know, you can call it whatever you want, but you know, we all have like something that makes us us. And I feel like part of that aspect of me is being a woman, right? And like, I don't know, why is that wrong? Tell me, go.
So I wouldn't say you being a unique individual and part of that collection of things that makes you being a woman is what's wrong. I'm perfectly comfortable with the notion that you are your own unique entity and you have values and beliefs about yourself. And one of those is that you're a woman. That is totally on board, and that there's no like supernatural unjustifiable claim there or unfalsifiable claim. It's when you make the claim about like a dualistic, you know, a ghost in the shell, as it were. And normally men have the man ghost in their shell, but for some reason us trans women, we got a woman ghost in our shell. And so that's the kind of claim I'm talking about. I realize sometimes people who are maybe not super like into like the atheist debate space or whatever, and haven't like had a lot of these like more philosophical discussions, maybe kind of just view their own consciousness as like synonymous to a soul. But I think typically the claim about a soul is this dualistic claim about a entity separate from your physical body that interacts with your brain and your mind, sometimes they'll call it, in reality. And that soul having some sort of essentially female property. That's what I object to. I don't object to the notion that you are an individual and that you are a woman.
Yeah. As soon as it's a supernatural claim, then I don't accept it. But also I think it can become even more problematic. Like if you just say there is a soul and it contains some information about me and it's supernatural, my first argument would be like, well, what information does it contain? Because any part of your personality, who you are, I can go in with a spoon and scoop that bit out of your brain, and you no longer have it. And I we don't necessarily know where all the parts of the brain are, but I can just chop a few bits around, and eventually I'll find it, and then that will no longer be you anymore. And that's kind of horrible, but I think that, amongst other things, shows that there isn't some extra part of you which contains some part of your personality. But that's like the soul claim on its own. But if you were to then say these souls have some innate maleness or femaleness, or masculineness and feminineness, suddenly you're making some claim that those things are innate to the universe. And then we say, well, which parts of it? Because suddenly it becomes very anti-feminist very quickly when you say, like, oh no, because not saying you, Rhea, but like someone said that my soul is feminine and female because it is soft and nurturing and wants to bring life into this world. It's like, whoa, hang on a minute. Now you're making the claim that being a woman essentially contains those things, and potentially even that women that don't have those things aren't truly supernaturally women. And you're kind of then making the claim that the feminist fight to liberate women from these ridiculous expectations on their behavior is impossible because God has created some kind of magical innate qualities to those things. So which is often the claim from some religious people. So there's multiple layers to it, and I think if it's just the claim of a soul, then I can have just a general atheist argument about it. But if it's the claim of a gendered soul or a sexed soul, then suddenly I'm going to have a feminist argument about it, and I'm going to be a lot more hot-headed.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between, like, a general deistic claim, if you think, like, there is some, like, prime mover, as it were, but you don't have any, like, claims about knowing anything about it, versus, like, being, oh no, the Christian God that has these specific characteristics created the universe. Both are unfalsifiable, and there's no evidence for them, but one is, like, adding extra layers that you just have no justification for whatsoever.
Yeah,
I gotcha. So, like, I hear you guys, like, talk about that concept and how it's, like, faulty all the time, but I always think to myself, like, yeah, but I feel like I do have, like, like, I wouldn't call it a soul, but, like, I do feel like I have some sort of, like it's innate, and it call it what you will. I feel like it's, mismatched from my body. And, like, how is that,
right.
How is that problematic? But no, what you're saying makes sense. I understand.
Well, I'm not arguing that there isn't an innate part of you that led you to believe you're trans. I would, in fact, argue that there is an innate part of you. I just don't think it's supernatural. Yeah. I think it exists within your brain.
Okay.
Yeah, and when the transphobes finally find out the way to eradicate us, they'll be able to go into our brains and snip it out and insert the male part, and then we'll just get on with it, just like they wanted. Because lobotomy or brainwashing is the only way you're ever going to get rid of trans people. So that's probably what they got away for.
Unless we uncover that there truly is a magical soul, right? I mean, like, then that solves everything.
That is possibly also true. But then what happens? Then potentially there could be both, right? So there could be a part of your brain which predisposes you to gender dysphoria and a sex soul. And then which trans people are the real ones? Are they the ones? Because you've got like 4 different groups, haven't you? You've got the ones who have both, the ones who have one or the other, and then the ones who have neither, who are still saying they're trans anyway. And how much trans? And then we have a hierarchy, and then anyway.
Yeah, like the brain thing, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think it's fair.
Cool.
I think it's totally fair to think, like Arden was saying, there's this innate part of me that's trans, and this is why you see trans people saying things like, "I was trapped in the wrong body," or "I felt like I was a woman on the inside," or "I have a woman's soul." Like, that's what a lot of religious trans people say, and then transphobes come in and be like, well, souls don't exist, and what does it even mean to feel like it's a woman on the inside? That's a nonsense claim. How do you know what it knows to feel like a woman? It's like, well, yeah. And some of the people making those claims are wrong to make those claims. They're logically fallacious, but that is the wrong way to address the underlying premise here, which is that trans people are a real thing and gender dysphoria is a real thing, which we can observe to be true, measure and make predictions based on, regardless of whether someone out there describes it as a soul. Because you could say the same thing for sexuality, like, oh, I've got the sexuality of someone who's attracted to men. Like, well, it sounds to me like you're describing being attracted to men, rather than the fact that you're making the claim that the only reason you're attracted to men is because souls are real, and because souls aren't real, therefore you're not attracted to men. Haha, QED, get wrecked. It's like, well, no, that isn't actually that's like at the very best a idiot's way of trying to address this, and usually a bad faith way of trying to address this, because there are some people who make claims about stuff and they are misinformed, and if you debunk them, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have managed to debunk the entire premise. So, but I'm ranting again, Red.
Cool.
I feel like you did also have another comment on the call screen notes we might be able to briefly address if you'd like to say that.
Yeah, sure. I guess since I wasn't able to get a rise out of Arden with that last one, I do have, so like, I don't know. I have been in transition since my oldest kid. I have two kids, 2 and 4. My 4-year-old was 2 when I came out. And so like, he's getting to the age where like, he's realized that like, I'm different from the other daddies around, you know, and like how it's in, because that's its own issue, is that my ex is uncomfortable with me being anything other than daddy. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. But yeah, I don't know. I like trying to conceptualize it such that a 4-year-old can understand, without getting like too far into the weeds and without, you know, saying anything that like ultimately I'm gonna have to explain away again later, you know, like the trapped in the wrong body thing, or the, you know, I don't know, because like he's had a few moments where he's come to me like, where he'll be, you know, he'll call me she, he'll call me a girl, but then sometimes, you know, like he'll be joking around because he doesn't really understand the weight of it or like what he's saying, but he'll be like, nah, you're a boy. I'll be like, oof, yeah, but you know, if somebody tells you that they're a girl, you just say, okay. So I don't know. Like, do you guys have any thoughts on like how to you know, down for the kiddos?
I think it's good to have in mind that you don't want to tell them something that is then wrong that you have to explain away in the future. Because you could easily say, everyone has a soul and it's either a boy's soul or a girl's soul, and I had a girl's soul. And that might communicate it to them, but then they come away with like wrong information. But I think you can explain it in a way that is like that dumbed down.
Definitely.
But just without invoking supernatural, and you can just be like, most boys grow up to be men, but some boys don't want to be men and they want to be women when they grow up, and that was me. Like, I feel like to a 4-year-old, or to most kids, until they get to like the argumentative teenager age, that is enough information, and lots of them are just like, okay, and you don't need some big existential discussion about the horrors of dysphoria or anything like that, and they will ask that when it comes to it. You know, they're going to want to know, and when teenagers get to the age where they want to argue about everything, you can have an argument about it too, but until then, I just feel like that is a reasonable description. I mean, I often have, you know, people are trying to be confrontational, be like, oh yeah, well, what even is a trans woman then? And like, well, at the dumbest down level, it's like someone who's born and the doctor was like, it's a boy, and now they're like, I'm a woman. That's pretty much, you know, that's it, and that works as an explanation to kids. You're like, when you were born, the doctor said it's a boy, and when I was born, the doctor said it's a boy as well. But I was like, nah, I don't want to be, so I changed it. But it's fine. It's fine either way. Most boys want to be men when they grow up, and that's cool too. That's great. So yeah.
I don't really have much to add to that. I just would note that, like, I think kids are particularly resilient with this stuff. I started transition about 5 years ago now, and now there's more details to my story, but we don't need to get into that right now. Anyway, my little brother is just turned 11. He doesn't remember a time when I wasn't a girl. But even still recently, my stepmom accidentally misgendered me in front of him. But interestingly enough, he never, ever makes a mistake because, you know, regardless of, I'm sure there's questions in his head. I'm sure he's confused to a certain extent about why I am maybe different than other girls he knows and why my parents, you know, maybe still gender me incorrectly. He might have those questions, but he still seems to have recognized that in summation, other people, including him and me, all see me as a woman. And so he was like, you know, whatever extra aspects are around it, I think kids are really resilient to just kind of like, as things get normalized around them, just accepting them and not really needing to or wanting to question that deeply. Because really, like, my little brother is like, I want to play hockey and like play the arcade game. Like that's the extent of his, like, he's not allowed technology, so they have like an old arcade machine in our house. Yeah. So like I don't know. I appreciate that there's confusion maybe that your kid's having. Generally, I'm sure that like as he gets older and starts to understand his relationship to you better, it's going to get a lot easier to navigate that, and that he's just going to think it's normal because it is normal, and he's going to have the most direct experience of that, you know?
Yeah. And also another way to look at it is like you have to be taught transphobia. Like if you weren't ever taught transphobia, you wouldn't care at all. And obviously he's going to encounter transphobia and someone's going to try and teach it to him at some point. But it is still something he's got to learn. And if you're already there proving it's all a load of rubbish just by existing and being nice and being his parent, then he's not going to learn it as well. So any confusion will just be resolved through experience in general.
Yeah. That's a comforting thought. I appreciate that.
Good.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have a ton else. Just kind of, thank you. Appreciate it. But yeah, it was a pleasure talking with you guys. Love the show. Jimmy, fuck you. You're not here very often anymore, but still, fuck you.
That the more reason to pick up. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rhea.
Thanks, Rhea.
Talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
I think we did have one question from Rhea that went unanswered, which was which arcade machine?
It's like one of those arcade machines that has like 9,999 arcade games kind of thing, you know? I think he only plays like Donkey Kong and Galaga, but I mean, those are kind of like the best ones, so, you know. Just kidding.
I went into a metal bar in Portugal, and they had one of those million games in one things, and the people there were playing Streets of Rage 2, but with Sailor Moon sprites. Just
interesting. So we've got 2 callers left on the line. Before we get to them, assuming that Katie, you're good for that on time. Cool. I want to remind you guys that after we get to these last 2 callers, we're going to move on to super chats. Any super chat of $5 or more, we'll read out loud. I will say I might miss some because my super chat thing is like disconnecting and reconnecting repeatedly today. So don't be afraid to ping me and try to get me to get anything that I miss. But all right, until then, let's talk to Robin. Pronouns are he, him. He's been on the line for almost an hour. Robin. Over an hour. Oh, an hour and a half. It just updated for me. Yeah, Robin, you are on the line. What's going on?
Hello. Hi there.
Hi.
So,
Hi.
I work in the NHS as an Equality, Diversity, Inclusion coordinator. And obviously, I'm really eager to do anything I can to support trans rights. We do things like training. I've been able to get some training run by a trans person with that lived experience, things like that. But a part of me does feel just at ill ease with the fact that the NHS as an organisation is just causing so much harm in the way that trans healthcare is set up, and that there's such little traction in changing that. And a part of me wonders that, say, when LGBT History Month comes out and sort of in a meeting it said, oh, well, let's have an event for that this month, put something together. and it's not really anything that's that meaningful. It's not really going to have much of an impact. Am I sort of engaging in pink washing to some extent? And I guess the deeper question of what do you do to try and see a bit more movement on a larger level? How do we support trans rights?
Yeah, it's a difficult situation to be in, because obviously the NHS is a really great thing, and anyone who's working to make it better is doing a good thing. But also it has more problems, and it has more problems by the day as the Conservatives pull it apart, but like specifically for trans people. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh, I'm doing something at my work. What can I do to make things better for trans people?" And I can't help but my first reflex being like, they just want to do a presentation about pronouns. And I'll just be like, do not just do a presentation about pronouns. Like, it's good to say, call people by the right thing and stuff. But I feel like, and this might not be the case, and certainly there are like maybe older people who don't have the internet and stuff. But I do feel like hopefully soon or now we are past the point where you need to be like, some people might have different pronouns. Like, maybe just have that as a comment. But like, I have seen before where someone's had like half an hour presentation about it or something. Whereas, if someone said to me, how could we improve the NHS for trans people without having to get the government to step in or the head of the NHS to make like big sweeping claims? Because obviously what we want to do is like desegregate the NHS and make it so the gender clinics don't need to be some bottleneck which is designed to hurt trans people. But there are things that we can do before that. Like, lots of GPs might not know, but they're allowed to prescribe hormones. They're allowed to do bridging prescriptions where they can give a prescription of hormones whilst referring someone to a gender clinic. And the waiting list for gender clinics can be multiple years. So that can make a big difference to someone's life. And it's not expensive. It's not a difficult prescription, especially if someone comes in and says, I transitioned socially 5 years ago. I've already been on hormones that I've been buying off the internet. Can you please prescribe me some? Like, they're allowed to do that. And if they could just inform themselves of that and look up what the specific NHS protocols and stuff are, that would be great. Because in my experience, and from talking to other trans people, a lot of doctors just kind of panic because they don't really want to do the wrong thing, and they've heard about detransitioners and they don't want to be like liable for something. But if they can just look up what they're allowed to do, they are allowed to prescribe hormones, and that will make a big difference. Another I guess big difference they can make is in documents and paperwork and stuff. They are allowed to change someone's gender on the NHS system. And I went into the doctor's surgery and said, can I update my stuff on the system, talking to the receptionist. And the first one I talked to, I can't remember, I think they just said no, or maybe the second person I talked to said no. The first person gave me a form to fill in, but I ended up arguing with the receptionist a bit and then kind of giving up for a bit. And then I talked to my doctor and I was like, I want to kind of update myself in the system. And she was like, oh, I can do that. Turn around on a computer, click like 3 things. And we're like, there you go, it's done. Yeah. So doctors can do that. The receptionist can do it too. And I imagine the nurses can. I don't know who has what access to what things, but definitely people can change these things. They can change your name. They can change your Mr. or Mrs. I can't remember what that's called. They can change your gender marker. And also, when I went in and said, so I ended up having a really great, amazing GP for the first few years of my transition. And I went and said, I want to change my driving license and my passport, and I need a letter from you. She just said, well, either I can go away and research what I need to write exactly for this and write it myself and sign it and charge you the rate which I'm supposed to charge you, which was £75 or something, or because this letter is probably boilerplate, you can go look up what it is and bring it in and I'll sign it. So I did that. So I just went and looked what the letter is, and it's like, my patient is a trans woman and I agree that she's going to be transitioning and living as a woman. And And I just brought that in, and she just signed it for free, and it took 1 second. And I know other people but they haven't had good GPs, and they've battled for ages. And again, it's like she had already had trans patients, so she knew that this was a thing that she was allowed to do, and she could do, and she knew how to do it. And then again, the same thing then happened for getting my gender recognition certificate. And at that point, I had a bad GP, and it was an absolute total nightmare. But if they had known and they had wanted to help me, then they could have done it much easier. So this kind of stuff, if I was to go in and if I had like the ears of 100 NHS doctors, I would be like, 30 seconds to start. Just bear in mind, some people might want to be called different things. Just respect people. Don't be a bell end. Next slide. Did you know you're allowed to prescribe hormones? Here is how you do it. I have looked up how you do it, and here is the things like that. Accompanied with statistics like the waiting list for this gender identity clinic is 6 years. The mean age of people being referred to it is 21. So that means that they're going to have to wait like 1/4 of their life before they see, before they get to see any medication that will help them, that kind of thing. So that is the kind of thing that I would suggest. I don't know if that really answers your question, because I don't know what level you have or whose ears you have or what control you have over this, but does that help?
It does help, because I think part of me is just having a little bit of an existential crisis of not being able to fix everything. But it's important to just keeping focused on the fact that you can make little changes, and they will have a positive effect.
Some of these changes are big changes, because like you, I presume, have no power to desegregate the NHS for trans people. Like you have no power to close the gender identity clinics. But realistically, on the ground, to a single individual random trans person, if their GP is going to prescribe them bridging hormones or whatever it's called, that is a big change. That is a huge deal, because that is potentially the difference between like 6 years of suffering or not. And even if you just get one GP to understand they can do that, and they have 10 trans patients over the next 5 years, that's a huge difference to people's lives. So like, yeah, I often think about my like anarchist organized friends whenever I'm talking about trans rights, because I often get caught up in these big conversations where I'm like, the government needs to make this legal change in order to be correct. But also, if you just turn up to a trans person's house with like a £20 note, a sandwich, and a month's worth of estrogen, that is kind of making more difference than anything I ever do talking to a politician, because that person now has a better life. And that's the kind of stuff you can do as like a on the ground NHS worker, because you can be the person who turns up with a sandwich. I mean, you probably shouldn't turn up and give them hormones, because you might lose your job, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, thanks very much. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Robin.
No worries. Yeah, and thanks for doing your best to make the NHS better for people in general and trans people, because we need people like that. Because there are some of your counterparts who are definitely trying to make it worse for us. So it's good to know that there are some.
Yeah, that could be a whole another question, but it's probably too specific. So maybe for another.
Well,
we'll be here next week, so maybe call back.
Yeah, call in again. Yeah. And if you do call in again, we won't keep you waiting for 1 hour 39 minutes before we take your call.
Well, I just get to listen to the show. It's what I'd be doing anyway.
Okay, wicked.
Thanks, Robin. Best of luck.
Thanks very much.
Right.
Bye.
All right, we're just going to keep cruising and take this last call. Last up on the line today is Astrid in Canada. Pronouns are she, her. Astrid, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, hi. I'm in California, and
yep, that is what CA means, not Canada.
I am a trans woman myself. I first of all look up to both of you. Love the show; it's fantastic. I personally, like, I have my own, of course, journeys of fighting dysphoria and all that kind of shit and everything. But, of course, the other side of that, gender euphoria, which feels awesome when it happens. I'm fairly proud of my body, but, like, the things that give me dysphoria are, like, the fact that my facial hair insists on growing and stuff like that. I hate that. Just kind of like the overall shape of my chest and everything like that. Not a fan. Otherwise, I've been on HRT for quite some time, and I've really loved all the changes that have come with it, and I do plan on pursuing things to seek more gender affirmation. But one of the things that I have struggled with trying to explain to people about my gender euphoria is of course, I have a penis. I don't really care. And in fact, as I have continued in my sort of trans existence, the more I'm okay with being like, actually, I'm really proud that I have this. And in fact, I'm proud of, like, my hands. They're big, and some people, I guess, would say that they're masculine, but I really like my hands too. And there's other things along that line that I really appreciate and love about my body, but I think that those also give me an interesting sense of gender euphoria as well. And when I explain that to folks, I don't know, I am met with either silence or interesting looks, or like, what do you mean? Or the classic, like the one that I get a lot is, are you sure you're a trans woman? And I don't know how to approach that, really. So I'm here on the show being, hell, I don't know how to explain this.
Yeah.
And I like, if there's something that I can say to better explain it, I'd love to know what it is. But yeah.
I mean,
sorry, actually, Arden, you should go first because I took the whole last one.
it's all right. I was gonna say, as far as like what you should say to, maybe make people not have certain prejudice about you, I think that is not something that you can really control for. And I'm not sure it's something you ought to try to control for either. I think it can be really unhealthy sometimes to try to appeal to people not being bigoted. I think you can really wear yourself down by trying to, like, think if I just phrase it the right way, they won't have prejudice about me. Like, and I think that can be a wasted effort sometimes. But I'm wholeheartedly on board for, well, I personally might have, like, genital dysphoria or whatever. I don't think anybody should have to feel ashamed of their body if you're not. Like, I don't want you to, like, have a situation where, like, I think it was Sweden, many countries for a long time had a requirement of changing your sex marker on, like, your birth certificate as needing to get a sex change. I don't want trans people to feel like they have to get surgeries to like, be accepted in society. That is not, I only want people to get gender affirming surgeries because they feel like it's going to make them happier. That should be the reason that we're doing this, right? Not because you are trying to appeal to like some sort of conformist acceptance sort of thing. Yeah, it's an unfortunate fact of the place we're in trans acceptance, where I understand that that's going to throw some people into doubt. But honestly, like, a huge aspect of, the feminist movement has been trying to preach that women shouldn't have to, get nose jobs and breast augmentations to better conform to society's expectations of them so that they can feel more okay. Like, it should be the other way around. Society should be acknowledging that women's bodies are diverse and they look so different. There's such a wide range of possibilities And just because somebody doesn't necessarily meet your expectations doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. So, I mean, if you're looking for us to say, like, you're still a valid trans person because you don't have bottom dysphoria, like, yeah, definitely hardcore, you're still a valid trans person, and it's totally okay to not want to get genital surgery. That's very acceptable.
Yeah, I guess if I was trying to explain it to someone, I'd be like, well, you know, there are some cis women who are like bodybuilders who get super muscly and super hench, and if you look at their comments online in their photos, there's always some pathetic conservative incel man being like, you're not a real woman, if you're attracted to this, you're basically gay. It's like, do you think that, like, and a classic thing that lesbians have been told for since the dawn of time is like, are you sure, are you trying to be a man, are you sure you're not a man? Like, fuck off. And if you say this to the kind of cis person who I assume that you're going to be friends with otherwise, like, do you think that's cool? Do you think that this like whiny incel who is made inferior by the fact that a woman is stronger than him, do you think now she is a man? Like, do you doubt the fact that she's a woman? And do you doubt the fact that like a lesbian is a woman because she's attracted to other women exclusively? Which characteristics of people, of women, invalidate them and which ones don't? And which ones do you look down your nose at when you see other people invalidating women based on those? Like, is it just totally arbitrary? Is it the ones that you find personally attractive? Like, you can make people really suddenly go on the defensive and be like, like, you're like, are you saying this because you're only attracted to women with small hands? Like, I know other women with big hands. Are they not women? And I think that can usually get people, if they're willing to have any kind of introspection at all, that can usually get past everything apart from genitals, where they often then have some kind of breakdown and their brain falls out. And I think that you usually have to get people on board with understanding that dysphoria and sex, neither of those things are binaries, and to try and explain to someone that sex characteristics, there's loads of them. Sex isn't just a one-dimensional property like a slider from one side to the other. Sex is made up of all of your different sex characteristics. And like, often when I explain non-binary people, I will say, well, where they want them, you know, what's typically male and what's typically female. And that's true for some non-binary people. But it's also true for some trans people who you would usually call a binary trans person. And really that distinction's kind of a load of rubbish. And the whole reason that we have to describe people as non-binary to cis society is because we're trying to say, like, there's not just two boxes, but that doesn't mean we're saying there's three boxes. And it doesn't mean that we're saying that the two boxes are trans woman who has hormones and face surgery and genital surgery and also likes pink and also, like, that's one, and then trans man is the other one, and then non-binary is all the rest. It's like the whole thing is a load of rubbish. We as trans people are faced with dysphoria for a bunch of stuff, and we want to change that stuff. But for the rest of the sex characteristics, maybe we don't care, or maybe we do care and we specifically don't want to change them, but we're just trying to fit into some society that says you have to fit into one box or the other. And that's bullshit. But if I am forced to fit into a box, then the box woman, you know, works for me best, and maybe even works for me better than if we also introduce non-binary as a possible box. But you can also, because people really do get hung up on genitals, just point out that it doesn't matter. Like, they don't know what your genitals are. I wouldn't know what your genitals you had, other than the fact that you told me. And even if you tell me, you could still, theoretically, as a true skeptic, you could be lying to me. And I would only really know if I saw them. And I am never going to see them. It's never going to affect my life at all. I don't think you're the kind of person who's like getting them out and waving them around. Maybe you are. And maybe you love nudist speeches where that kind of behavior is totally socially acceptable. And in which case, that's cool. And it might affect people's perceptions of you. And I'm sure you're aware of that. But if you're not, like in day-to-day life, no one's ever going to know about your genitals. And if they're like, well, are you really a trans woman? Like, well, look at the rest of me. How do you think society reacts to me? What do you think this affects my rights? Like, do you think, what you're saying, I shouldn't be allowed hormones because I don't want to have genital surgery, or I shouldn't be allowed protections from misogyny at work because it's just ridiculous. Like all of these, any claim that anyone's making here is ridiculous, and all that's really left is their true ontological belief of what a real woman is, and like, who cares? Like, fuck off. Like, if you want to, it's effectively like the souls thing that we were talking about earlier. Like, oh no, in order for me to consider you to have a female soul, you must have a vagina. It's like, well, okay, you're an idiot. do what you want, mate. And that doesn't affect my real life. So I guess they're the angles I would take. Bear in mind that genitals do hold a special place in a lot of people's brains, and just pointing out that it doesn't actually affect them and doesn't matter and shouldn't affect your healthcare. I don't know. Does that help?
It does. I've just kind of been sitting here nodding along because these are all things that I agree with and I feel, and I'm like, yes, I do agree with that. Yes, I do agree with that too. And just kind of like down the list. And I was really pleased that you brought up the whole, like, there's 3 boxes and the third box is non-binary, because that's definitely another one that people have sort of prescribed to me, to kind of be like, yeah. Oh, are you sure that this isn't it? And it's like, oh, I know plenty of people who are identifying as non-binary. I know a lot of my friends are, in fact, but I do not think that is me. I think of myself and I'm like, I am a woman. That is how I see myself. And I am happy to pursue the gender affirmation that I want, and to have I really want to have the full gender euphoria sort of experience that I want to have. And yeah, I specifically wanted to reach out because both of you are much more, I feel, you say words better than I do in this sense. And I didn't really know how to say what both of you said out loud with my mouth. So thank you.
I just want to add that I think it's interesting that people try to invalidate your womanhood, and yet I think there's like a quintessential like feminist misogyny moment happening here, which is that like you aren't trying to say like you have to have sex with my body as it is. You're just saying, this is my body. This is what makes me happy. This is what makes me comfortable. And there seems to be this sort of like, this like quintessential misogyny moment of like, women's bodies for me. I don't like that part of women's body. Why this woman body not for me? Like, kind of like a basic level thinking moment going on. And that results them to be like, no, you can't be a woman then, because it's a thing that people fall into a lot, where they're like, by invalidating somebody's womanhood, a trans woman's womanhood, they're also like using like really stereotypical misogynist tactics to do it. So I mean, like, I'm sorry that that's happening to you. That's terrible, but just know that they're fucking wrong and shitty for it, and that you're allowed to be happy in your body however the fuck you want to be.
I will be. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, well, good luck, Astrid. I hope you start feeling better about this. And if you maybe want to call back, please do that.
I hope you learn to
thank
say the
you.
words good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Right, bye, Astrid.
Goodbye.
Bye. Right.
Okay.
We are
And-
about to hit super chats. If you would like to send a super chat of $5 or more, we will read it out no matter what it says. So now is your time to embarrass us.
Maybe not no matter what it says, but like
No
for the
matter
most
what.
part.
No limits. Freedom of speech will be respected.
Now listen, I'm happy to take your money if you want to send it to us, but if you say something that's super awful, I'll just take your money and not read your super chat. Okay, let's get up our super chat window. We've got $4.99 to start. Oh, wait, also, before, really quick, I just wanted to thank Jess for call screening. Thank you, Jess. You're amazing. I love that
Thanks,
you're here
Jess.
every week helping us out. But to start, we've got
Jess.
$4.99 from Gayest Husky, which is just a phenomenal username.
name.
I love it. Trans people are valid and natural. Tersts have a one-track mind, obsess over the privats of other people, and are a cult. Oh, the privates. I see. You're doing funny spelling. I was like, is privats like some like esoteric like slur that I don't know about? Anyway, thank you, Gayest Husky.
It is now.
The privats.
Yay, maths time. £5 from Sean. It's conjectured that each odd integer n greater than 5 can be written as n equals p plus 2q for primes p and q with p odd. So q can be even. So it can be... Wait. Yeah, 2's a prime, isn't it? Not sure if I've done this one. You haven't said that one to me before, as far as I remember.
I
That is
totally understand this
interesting.
one. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Absolutely, Sean. Yeah, I
Oh,
understand.
you finally got Arden one. You can question her next week, ring in and get her to repeat it back.
I didn't.
She might have solved
understand.
it by then.
$5 from Jason Jones. # denim jacket. Call out my townsfolks in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, and get any of them to call in to defend their beliefs. Some vocally support Tom Woods. Yeah, I mean, this is like one of the problems that I've experienced. There's like a dissonance a lot of bigots will have. Yeah, this is the guy who said Oklahomans don't want this filth in our state or something to that effect. He used the word filth in reference to LGBT people, where a lot of them will vote for whatever conservative candidate is on the ballot, but might have queer friends or family and don't have a problem holding those things, even though they are like in direct contradiction as far as I can tell. But yeah, if they want to call in and try to defend the things Tom Woods has said or the things that Ryan Walters has said, we'd be happy to talk to them. But
Yep, we would.
I might roast them though. Just kidding.
Another £5 from Sean, who says, I finished Joyce's book recently. Interesting. It's awful. She claims she's only addressing trans activists. So some trans women AGPs, the nerve. Yeah, she that's like absolute classic from any bigoted knobhead, is to be like, oh yeah, no, I don't hate gay people, I just hate gay rights activists. Oh, I don't hate black people, I just hate Black Lives Matter because they're corrupt. It's like,
yeah,
come on, it's just so overused. It's along the lines of, but some of my friends are black, like level of, surely we're past anyone falling for this rubbish.
Actually, on the Black Lives, somebody did that to we go to these reptile conventions all the time. We live in Texas, a lot of conservative people, and so people are following like our Instagram account. Someone noticed that Matt had Black Lives Matter in his bio and was commenting like a long ass comment on one of our Instagram posts, exclusively about reptiles on this page, about how like Black Lives Matter is corrupt and yada yada yada. And it's like, okay, you need help. We've got £20 from Jackie Greenland. 3rd week in a row, I can't watch live as I got messed up by time zone shifts, and since I got told off for voting without watching last week, just take my money. No, it's totally okay. Yeah, also, Jackie, aren't you in the States and Texas even for the... Oh, sorry, I probably shouldn't be, like, doxing where you are. I remember you
Isn't
mentioning...
your address 123 Fake Street?
I remember you saying you were coming to the States for the, something career-related for the eclipse. So if that's the case, let us know. We'd be happy to... I'm sure Matt and I would grab, like, lunch with you or something.
If you pay. $5 to Melissa. My name is Harry Potter. Oh, you forked my parents. Prepare to dong. Sorry, my mind isn't dirty enough for this task. I said to chat, what's the raunchiest Harry Potter thing they can get past the profanity filter?
That's pretty good. I like it.
Abolish daylight saving time. Yes. I think that the time zone we're in now is garbage, and we should be in the one that's coming up all the time.
Oh, the longer daytime. Although I think I've heard that it's like supposed to be better for our circadian rhythm to have the one that everyone likes less, but also everyone likes it less, so
yeah, fuck off. Who cares? Just stay up till 1 a.m. every night anyway.
We've got $5 from Charlotte. I self-ID as a fan of the line. Prove me wrong on an ontological level. Are we doing hashtag teams? Yeah, that's kind of, honestly, that was kind of the point I was getting at with, what was his name?
And yes, we are. We're only doing hashtag Katie's today, though, so.
That is incorrect.
£5 from Jack KV. Brilliant show tonight. Watching with a jar of mayo and Linkin Park playing in the background. I hoped you choked. Hashtag Team Katie.
That's amazing. I love it. I like when people do the hashtag Team Katie, but also like kind of insult you all in one. It's a beautiful little moment for me.
Reminds me of when Ben was past his doctor's thing and everyone was like, congratulations, Ben. Hashtag Team Katie.
Yeah, that's so good. Poor Ben doing all this hard work to be degraded in front of our audience. $4.99 from Louise Richardson. Hashtag Team Katie this week. I think much of the opposition cis people have to trans people is that they think of us as just some hypothetical construct. Yeah, I think it's a mistake people make when they hear social construct to think that it is just made up, essentially. They think those, like, social construct and fictional are synonymous, and it's just so not the case. Or they just think of us as, like, a common Fox News headline and not really more than that.
$5 from Charlotte. Hashtag Team Poppy. Here she is, just for you.
Katie's getting a lot of votes today. I do not approve of the way this is going down, and I am looking down on you, Team Arden, for failing to show up here. $4.99 from Seven Lions. I'm trans and poly, as are many of my friends. As a group, are trans people more likely to be polyamorous, or is this just confirmation bias on my part? I
think yes.
Yeah, I think yes, but I don't think it's like... I don't know that I'm convinced that polyamory is necessarily innate in the same way that, like, being gay or
hashtag cancel Arden.
Go for it, cancel me. I think polyamory is... there's obviously a bit of a... like innate how you prefer relationship dynamics to be that as a part of that. But I also think polyamory, a big part of it, is like a sort of philosophical kind of notion behind like how jealousy should be handled in relationships and things like that, and attachment styles. I do think trans people tend to be more polyamorous, but it's probably more just because we are already confronting a lot of the preconceived notions that we hold about ourselves and society, and that causes us to question that one as well.
Yeah, when you're already destroying cis heteropatriarchy, you might as well destroy cis hetero monopatriarchy all in one go. Like you've already broken enough of the rules that the other rules just seem easier to break. But I do disagree. I think that some level of on the ratio of poly to mono is there's some kind of nature aspect to it.
So,
because
sure.
I just do not think I could ever be attracted to more than one person at once. Like some people just seem to be like, oh, in my ideal relationship is I have sex with a load of people, but I'm only in love with one person. I'm just not interested.
I'm not even sure that that's how I would think of poly. So, like I've considered myself...
Or love as well. Same
I've
too.
described
I could only
myself
love
as...
one person.
Yeah, I've described myself as poly before, but for me, I I don't really feel like I feel strongly about each individual relationship that I'm in, whether it needs to be like multiple people or a single person. I don't really get jealous. In fact, I think I have a little bit of compersion. Like, Matt is super monogamous, but if he were ever to like start going out and dating, I'd be like, yeah, I would still want to be like his hype up by the side. But I don't really view that as like, I would say that I'm innately not a very jealous person. But I don't know if that translates to polyamory. I think the polyamory is like an extension of how I view jealousy and attachment styles in relationships. But obviously everyone's different. Yeah. Am I going to get canceled for this? Oh no.
Probably.
Hit me with it.
$5 Canadian from MK. So Canada seems to be going in a bad direction. I was wondering if either of you know what's going. If not, I really hope everyone has a great day. I just think that it's very, like, we had this kind of global shift, right? A while ago it started, and it's still kind of going on, but some places are bouncing back, some places are only just kind of getting there. And it's very easy to see some political move and think, oh God, it's just like Trump all over again, just like Brexit all over again. And maybe Canada is having their Trump and Brexit. I don't know. I'm not Canadian. I'm not connected enough. But I have also seen other people say this several times about Canada over the last like 5 years. And Canada still seems to be better than both the UK and the US. So
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe Canadians will disagree, but don't necessarily panic whenever you get a right-wing politician get a seat somewhere, because
I think
that's not always...
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think Alberta passed some laws, but I also think Alberta has been historically viewed in Canada as sort of like the south of Canada, like the more conservative, what do they call it, territory? No, that's not right. What's the word? They don't have states. Is it territories? Province? Whatever. You guys know what I'm trying to say. It's the more conservative region of the country, and so it's not really surprising that region would enact more transphobic policies. But I don't think you have to worry, because the what's his name, Justin Trudeau, I mean, I know there's probably totally valid criticisms of him, but he's also done some really good pro-trans statements that like you would never see from a US politician, that I'm like, you guys are light years ahead of us.
$10. All I know about Justin Trudeau is that every single time he's mentioned, someone posts that photo of him in blackface.
Sure, yes.
That's
I'm not
like
trying
the
to say
only single fact I know about him.
I'm not trying to say he's at all without faults, that he's probably has plenty of things you can criticize him for.
He's a politician. He's probably a dickhead, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
$10 from Dade Murphy. This $10 is for the emancipation of Forrest from Jimmy's basement. # go fuck yourself, Jimmy. If anyone's seen the clips, there's a bunch of outros. There's like maybe 6 or 7 different ones, and one of them is Jimmy saying, "The rumors are true, Forrest is locked in my basement." So that's the reference.
It's going to need more than $10 to get him out. We're going to need a SWAT team and a hostage negotiator. $4.99 from Rhea Jane. Oh, good. Thought my question about the game was lost in the ether. Thanks, you all. Question about the game, which you all just lost. Unlucky. I don't know what this refers to.
It might be... I'm not sure. If you're talking about a super chat that you sent earlier in the show, because I was talking about I'm doing my best to get super chats. Sometimes if you send them before the show starts, they do get lost as far as the system's concerned. I did type in your name on the search, and I didn't see any other questions from you. So if you did send something else, it did get lost.
So maybe... Oh, I know what it was. We were talking to Ray earlier, and I said, which games console thing do you have?
Oh, yes.
That
right.
Game.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
We solved it.
You all still lost the game.
Good job, team. The game. I haven't thought about that since high school. $20 from Larry Fishman. I'm 11 months into MTF HRT and coming up on 2 months post-orchiectomy. Oh, wow. Congratulations. Overall, I'm happy with the changes I'm getting, but I've been told several times that the big changes start in the second year. What are the big changes? I think for me, that's when a lot of the fat redistribution stuff started becoming noticeable, as well as like the breast growth. There were like buds that happened pretty early, breast buds, but like actual breast growth didn't really occur until year like 2 or 3. but the fat
Nothing happened to
distribution,
me.
both in your face and in your like butt and hip region, also in like your arms, all of that was around year 2 and 3 that started to really become noticeable to me.
Yep. $10 from Dave Murphy. Hey, Katie, be it that you are an avid listener of metalcore, would you please name 2 bands you have listened to today? Why, yes, I could. I know it's not really metalcore, but Knocked Loose are just the most like ridiculously brutal band at the moment. I just fucking love Knocked Loose. If you like angry music, Knocked Loose is the peak of angry music in 2024. So good, so obnoxious. It's beat down really, so it's like the hardcore side. It's just like proper good, strong recommend. And if I'm recommending metalcore this time of year, early March usually, I always want to listen to this weird French metalcore band, which is like a cross between deathcore and Blink-182, with the worst band name of all time called Chunk No Captain Chunk, which I cringe to say out loud. I think it's like from a comic or something. I have no idea. But if you have a high tolerance for cringe, they are very good. It's literally like heavy deathcore breakdowns with like Whitechapel-esque vocals cut with like proper whiny Blink-182 music. It is just so good. Like 10 out of 10, strong recommend. So yeah, they're my 2 bands that I'm gonna recommend. Oh, also, just gonna say while we're on metalcore, Trivium and Bullet for Valentine are doing a like 20-year anniversary tour of their first albums, or first and second albums. I'm so ready for that. I'm so ready. It's gonna be so good. Make sure you see it.
We've got $5 from Laser Lizard. I have nothing productive to say, so here's $5 in hope of seeing fur babies / scaly babies. I wanted to get, that enclosure. I told you guys last time that we have skinks, and that one of them I was able to handle. Well, now she likes being handled so much that she leaps full force into the glass when almost every time I walk by. She's asleep today, though. She hasn't come out since this morning. Yesterday, she was up there all day begging to come out every single time I walked past. So you'll definitely get to see her in the future, but I keep looking back there because I keep hoping she's popping up. Because if I go over, she'll come out no problem and I could show her off. But dear, she's all sleepy today. Yeah, they're amazing. Definitely by far my new favorite reptile. Like point blank period. Emerald tree skinks, when you get them and they're very social, it's the best experience ever.
$10 from Allegedly Human. Hashtag Team Poppy, hashtag Team Metal. Yes, mate.
Right on. We got £5 from Les Watts. Katie, do you like football? And if so, which team do you follow? I lived in London for a long time and used to watch Arsenal.
No. I don't like football. Kind of hate football. I had to play football at school as a kid because boys play football, so I kind of hate it. But I do have a fun football story. When I was traveling around Southeast Asia, people would always be like, "Are you American?" And we'd be like, "No, we're English." And they'd be like, "Which team?" And like, people know England because of the Premier League football. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know anything about football. We always want to like make friends with the people who are like, especially when they're having you in their house for dinner or something. So I'd always just say Southampton because that's where I was at uni. And everyone would be like, "Oh yeah," because no one really likes Southampton as a football team. But one time I said it, and this guy was like, "Oh!" And he just like ran back in his shop, and then he came downstairs, and he was wearing like the full Southampton football kit, and he was like, "My team!" And like he made me take the selfie with him, and he was like, "Oh, Southampton, Southampton!" And, like started talking to me about Southampton football, and I was like, "I don't know anything about it," but yeah, cool. I'm glad I made his day.
Sports fans go hard. I was going to make a joke about American football, but I've honestly already forgot the joke that I was going to make, so it's gone.
I already forgot you were here.
$5. Wait, is this not? Yeah, $5 from Bumblebee. If you had been able to add one question to the Libs of TikTok interview, what would you have asked? Love from the Hive. Hashtag stay next. Hashtag team Katy. I don't know. I think Taylor did a pretty good job about making her look like a clown. I just think there was one point where, I can't remember the question. She asked her, like, something along the lines of, like, do you feel bad for the way that people talk in your replies? Like, clearly you're harboring a sort of white supremacist, like, audience. And she pushed back and was like, well, do you feel bad for the death threats that I get? Or something along those lines. I wish Taylor would have, like, pushed harder on that and bent. She did say, yeah, that's wrong. People shouldn't do that. But I wish she kind of would have dug in more on being like, now back to my question, since you dodged, that kind of thing. But that's how I approach conversations like this and debates. It's not how everyone does or ought to.
She definitely, like, got the real journalist vibe where she asks a question and they say something stupid, and rather than hammering down on it like we would, she's just like, and then changes the subject and asks a new question, because it's like, you have made my point. Yes. Next, and I'm very bad at that. Like, when someone says something stupid, I'm like, oh, I'm going to drill right down on this until you storm out. Whereas she's just like, okay.
I think my objection to the journalist approach that way is that I think it assumes too highly of the viewer's intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
That they're going to understand what happened there, and they just don't a lot of the time. And I think that's why I go so hard sometimes, why I've been called nuts or so crazy, or I go so hard, because to me, when people step out of bounds, I think if I don't point out exactly what's happened here, it will be lost on a lot of the audience. And if some people are lost because they think I'm too mean, those people sound like they're just misogynist to me, and I don't really care. But I think that's how you really drill home the point, but it's not everyone's approach. It's not for everyone, so.
Yeah, I think my main criticism is, like, you can journalist and ask questions in a way where you get them to incriminate themselves and just kind of move on. But you can do it without accepting their premises. Yeah. And several times she was just like, oh yeah, I support gender ideology. It's like, what does that even mean? Why are you giving them that trans people existing as an ideology at all? Like, it's just kind of, that made me cringe. I do like, God, I've forgotten her name now. Taylor Lawrence.
Yeah, Taylor Lawrence.
Yeah, or Lawrence. I do like her as a person and what she does in general, but that was kind of cringe. Don't do that again. Also, I guess the question I would just try and inject more propaganda in the questions, like what do you think about thinking every single medical organization on earth is wrong based on decades of evidence when you don't have any? And she'd be like, yeah, but what do you think about when I get threats? And he'd be like, yeah, but you do think every single expert on this is wrong, like, don't you?
Yeah, that's definitely more of my style as well. No shade to Taylor. I think she's great, and I there were a lot of moments about it that I think were phenomenal. And like we're saying, you know, if you have the intelligence to see what's happening, Taylor did great. But I just fear too often our people consuming all this media aren't good at that kind of literacy, and I think it's gonna be lost on a lot of people.
If you think someone that, like, brazenly thick is worth listening to, obviously Chair, or have you said her name, the Libs of TikTok lady, then you are not doing an analysis on that conversation at all. Like, she is, I mean, transphobes are generally thick, but for her position, like, in the UK, you have to be able to do some kind of, like, weaseling. You have to be snide. You have to hide what you're saying. You have to conceal what you really want a little bit. Mm-hmm. In the USA, you don't. So it just lets the thickest possible people rise to the top because they got nothing holding them back. So it's just incredible how dumb she was. Like, she contradicted herself almost every sentence. Like, she was like, "Hey, I never said that. Who said that?" And then, like, the next sentence, she was like, yeah, well, I just want to eradicate gender ideology. It's like, you just said you didn't say that, and now you're saying it. Like, good God.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that she was in particular so, like, incoherent that it was hopefully more obvious than a lot of cases. But yeah, that's just my fear with that.
What some people pointed out, which was good, was that the idiot general horde of the right-wing anti-trans crew probably just thought she was great because they think she's great, but the ones trying to do that kind of like, I'm actually a concerned liberal with an intellectual disagreement about, like, they were all really angry at her because they've been promoting her for ages and she was saying all of their arguments but just absolutely face planting on every single one, making them look stupid by the fact that she's their representative. Really the best thing that came out of that was that she wound up a bunch of shit people by being so bad at what they're all trying to do. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. We got $5.
Anyway, yeah.
Stephanie Helm saying, well, I'll show up for hashtag Team Arden. Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah. Someone has to, since clearly none of you fucking love me.
See, she gets angry. It's all rage. People only vote for her out of fear, so that's why true. You shouldn't do it.
You should fear me. Please do fear me.
£5 for Faye. Once the transgender agenda makes everyone transhumanists, what type of robot will you both be? Hashtag team. And then separately with no hashtag Arden.
Listen, okay? The whole transhumanist agenda fear, I think, is hilarious because genuinely, if people can use technology to transform our lives and our bodies in ways that improve our life substantially, I can't see any logical reason why you would object to that. I can see why you might object to, like, Star Trek-style transporter technology that would, like, destroy you and recreate, like, an assembly, like, a version of you. Sure. But, like, in terms of, like, if I can get, like, enhanced, what do you call it? Prehensile tail, like, robot attachment. Like, yeah, I mean, that's pretty fucking cool. Like, why would I not? Like, oh, cool, now I can, like, hold my coffee while I, like, do something with my hands, you know? Yeah.
I would be the kind of robot that has a setting in my, like, before the image gets from my eyes to my brain that automatically filters out any Harry Potter erotica, so I never had to encounter it in any situation in my life. Whether I was just innocently trying to get the train to work, you know, I don't want to stumble across that kind of filth.
It's like, that reminds me of the Black Mirror episode where they can, like, block people in their, like, contact implant, and so they just, like, don't see certain people walking around in society. It's weird.
Yeah, that, but for Harry Potter.
Yeah. This one's me. $5 from Bumblebee. Crawling in my skin. These wounds I will not heal. Fear is how I fall. Confusing what is real. Guilt tripping me, Snake Mom. Hashtag Team Arden. Thank you for the Linkin Park reference. My little 12-year-old emo ass is, like, feeling so related to by these lyrics, which is hilarious.
But now, really, you shouldn't like these lyrics, because crawling in my skin, I mean, that is a common lizard experience, but then these wounds, they will not heal. That's the whole point in shedding your skin, because then you can often grow things back, and, like, this fear is how I fall. You shouldn't be afraid when you're molting. It's bad for you, because then it'll make your molt less successful. Confusing what is real? I don't think so, because when you come out, you're like, I know what's real. This is me, and I'll eat my old skin. So this is anti-lizard propaganda, and that is the reason why Linkin Park is bad.
I've definitely caught Winston, who you guys have all seen. He likes to eat his own skin. I haven't caught the others eating their skin. I know they do that, the geckos, but I've watched him eat it. Fucking dopey-ass lizard. I love him to death.
$5 from Jason Jones. I don't know whether people say Hagrid or Hagrid. I always read it as Hagrid, and then everyone was like, Hagrid. I don't know. Raised his massive shaggy face from the steaming hot geyser hidden below the grey Venusian tanglet of Mrs. McGonagall's forested primal moss.
Oh, God. Oh, that's terrible. What the fuck? I definitely always read it as Hagrid.
Helen on your secret account, Jason.
Yeah. Although I do think I started reading after, like, the first couple movies came out, so I was probably poisoned my brain
Didn't learn to read until you were 16.
No, I actually was one of those kids who hated reading when I was really young. It was when I got older and I realized sometimes books could be good that I was like, oh, reading's fun when I give a shit. When I'm forced to read stuff for school, I was like, I will not read that just because you told me to.
I like reading as soon as I discovered Animorphs.
Animorphs. I never got into the Animorphs. I probably would have liked that.
Oh, it was so good. It affected my life. That's why I'm trans, mate. It transed me. $5 from Dade Murphy. Stephanie Helms, £5 inspired this $5 hashtag Team Arden donation.
Thank you, Dade Murphy.
No,
you're the only one who cares. You and Stephanie. Except for also Jackie Greenland. £5 from Jackie Greenland. I caught the end, so I'll add a hashtag Team Arden.
Jackie.
I'm in California right now, but I will be in Texas for the eclipse, so I'll ping you a message. Yes, please do. Absolutely.
Bing.
Ping, ping, ping.
$10 from Larry Fishman. I don't understand how gender euphoria works, and at this point I don't care. I think the answer would be disappointing, like how nuclear power plants work or the meaning of CCCP. I think how how nuclear works is actually not disappointing at all. It's really cool. What are you talking about?
Nuclear.
Nuclear.
I also don't experience gender euphoria. For me, the absence of dysphoria. Actually, the short went live, and it was one of our more popular shorts in the last week, where I made the analogy about, for me, I don't experience gender euphoria, but I have like a relief from dysphoria that I wouldn't describe as a good experience, but it's kind of like taking a massive shit, where you're like, man, I don't feel good, but I feel a lot better now.
Goodness sake.
It's
so
funny.
ladylike.
There were only... Oh my god, no, wait. There were only 3 negative comments on that short, and one of them was, this is a very ladylike analogy, and the other 2 were just like, that's a man. But all the rest of the comments were like, no, that actually totally makes sense, thank you.
So I always describe it like when you've had a blocked up nose for days, and then you wake up in the morning, and you're like, and you can breathe, and you're like, and you're just like, it's like taking a shit.
Come on, that's a everyone knows the taking a shit experience.
Everyone knows what it's like to have a blocked nose.
Yeah, but you take a shit more often than you have a clogged nose. Let's be real. Well, maybe you don't.
That'd be kind of a bad life if it was the other way around.
only a couple times a year.
Just once a year.
God
365 times.
What has this
Anyway,
become?
change the subject. I don't want to talk about this. 65 Swedish krona from Smartic. Happy that I had the time to follow the show live. It was a while ago. You're fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. God.
I am fantastic. Arden is not.
$9.99 from Jason. Hashtag Team Katy, because Metacore is so fresh in the spring.
Yes, it's a spring genre. It gets you hyped for the summer of thrash.
Okay.
$4.99 from Rare. Lol, yes, I meant the games console, but now I've lost the game. So hashtag Team Arden. Thank
you.
It's her fault that you lost.
Thank you. All right, and that is the last super chat so far. I'm sure someone will send one in at the last minute because that's what you guys like to do.
Quick, bye.
Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you so much to the mods. It looked like chat was pretty good today, but you guys are always doing so much work keeping the chat respectful. Thanks again to Jess for call screening. I don't know who this person is next to me. Don't give a fuck about her. See you guys all next week. Bye. If you want to be on the scrolling patron producers list, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/calltheline. It's the best way to support us. Fucking do it. Give us your money.
Or you could find out where Arden lives, sneak into a house, hold her at gunpoint, and be like, put me on the list.